See, I spoke to him 2 days ago. He said he was.
Hey guys, we are live now for season one, episode three of Static Plain Truth live. We got a great show for everybody today. We've got a few guests on right now. We should have more joining us. Right now, we've got Martin, Jeranism, and the wow, the lovely Fran Anderson, and I'm getting a huge feedback here. So sorry if I sound like I'm over talking myself. Bear with me one
That's
second here.
playing back somewhere, isn't it?
Yeah, I had to mute my little playback window, so forgive me, everybody. But yeah, it's still a beautiful Saturday, and I
Yeah.
thank you guys so much for joining us. We're gonna have a great show.
Yeah.
I just released a video that I've been working on for quite a while, so for any of you out there that haven't seen it, wait till
No,
after this
haven't seen it.
show and then watch it. Yeah, it's
I will do.
pretty good, but then again, I'm biased. So uh,
What's it called, John?
it is well, it's funny. It's called The Earth is a Globe
Hmm.
on opposite day.
Oh, right.
Yeah, makes
Okay.
sense, right?
Yeah, it does. Mhm. Oh, that'll
Yeah.
be good.
Well, because I mean, a fixed plane is pretty much about as opposite as you can get from a spinning sphere, right?
Yeah. uh, I've been looking into meteorites this week, and I've come to the conclusion that they are a hoax.
Meteorites. So we can definitely talk about that. First off, foremost, let's just do some quick introductions. I mean,
Yeah, man.
pretty much everybody on here needs no introduction, but we'll start with Fran. If you want to say hi, what you been up to?
Hi, how you guys doing?
Come
Excellent.
on, Ken.
Good.
Oh, that's what you were going to say about your Ginger Fest then. That was brilliant, that was, Fran.
Oh, yes, so that was Wednesday, and that was awesome. So I
Yeah, it
got
was good.
to hang out with some other ladies in the Flat Earth community, so that was really
Yeah,
cool.
yeah, it was cool.
Oh, I missed it. I'll have to watch it.
Yeah, it was good, John. You shouldn't miss that. It was really good.
Awesome, awesome, awesome. So, Jaren, what you been up to, buddy?
Oh, that's what you were going to
Another
say.
day, another dollar, you know?
That was brilliant, that was.
Yeah.
No, just been making videos. I'm sure everyone hopefully saw my latest. It was just a little fun. My wife and I did a little Gangnam Style parody. So
Yeah, I
that's
seen
out.
it. It was funny, that was.
Thank you.
Yeah, I seen
Earlier
that.
this week, I put out a little satellite video, and recently I've been looking into CGI and stuff like that.
Yeah.
Yes, the CGI. That's something that I'm wanting to get back into myself, and well, I've said it before, but I dabbled a bit with 3ds Max years ago, and so I'm sort of brushing my skills back off with it because it is a little bit complex to use, but once you get the hang of it, you really can achieve a lot of visual representations that are sort of hard to explain, but very easy to visualize in an animation. So yeah, so anything in particular in terms of CGI that that's struck you out of the ordinary?
No, I just saw a couple videos lately that I think people are depending on obviously what they see on video or what they see on TV to mean that it's legit, meaning that if you can just kind of watch it and you don't see anything wrong with it, that therefore it's real, and that's completely not the way we should be looking at things, because with green screening and chroma keying and everything else, so much is possible that there's no way you can differentiate anymore besides actually being at the event. So anything you see on TV certainly shouldn't ever be counted as being real, unless it's, you know, if it's an NBA basketball game, hey, maybe you can concede that that is real because you've got a crowd of 18,000 people, and if you talk to a couple people that are there, maybe you know, innocent bystanders or whatever you want to call them, then you can make your mind up that that was an actual event that took place. But even the crowd could be you know, green screened in. So I mean, it's what they're capable of is basically anything. And so if that's the truth, then how do we accept anything anymore as being fact unless we can ourselves be there and judge it? And so space gets the free pass of being considered real just because they show it to you on TV and because 500 people have been there. And they say, oh, well, no one's ever come out and said anything. Well, look at how many astronauts died in the 1960s, 1970s, and then, you know, tell me if it sounds advantageous to out your employer.
Yeah, really. Well, like what I forget the astronaut's name who was basically making fun of NASA because they couldn't communicate using their radios from the capsule of the shuttle when it was on the ground to the next building over. And I think he hung a lemon from it and said, if we can't talk to you guys from 50 feet away, then how are we supposed to talk to you from the moon? And a couple days later, he actually burned up inside of in a fire inside of the capsule, right? So.
They killed him, yeah.
And actually, we didn't get an introduction from Martin real quick, so you want to say hey and what you've been up to, and I do want to touch back on CGI a second before we get into media.
Yeah. I've been looking at the CGI, funny enough, this week as well. Just, well, basically, my sister visited earlier and said, oh, well, Tim Peake is definitely in the ISS. And then I showed her that piece of footage with him in front of the blue screen with the ball. And there's been a couple more, more explanatory ones made since then. She was like, oh, wow, well, he's not actually up there then, is he? I said, well, no, there's the proof. But I can't help feeling that, if you've got George Bush there, that they deliberately showed us that blue screen, didn't they? That was not by accident. They don't mess up like that.
Now, a blue screen behind George Bush?
Well, George Bush Senior was in sort of a NASA, sort of briefing room or what have you, and in the background you see Tim Peake in front of a blue screen with a green ball, and then later on they show you a bit of footage, and he's messing around with a ball of water,
Well, yeah.
So it's the practice run for that, but they still showed it to us, and I can't help thinking, they're not that dumb that they're going to show us that. They've definitely wanted us to see that. Just a little wind-up, I believe.
Yeah. Now, in terms of CGI, I think that one of the biggest, funniest things I've seen in a while is and I actually featured it in the video I just uploaded, but it's the two black holes who sort of let's get it on and turn into one black hole.
Yeah.
Yeah. So. First of all, the first thing they admit is they say this is CGI. This is the way that they put it is basically it's a blip on a chart that computers sort of did Einsteinian equations, and then graphic artists rendered an animation of what it would look like if you were in a spaceship. And the whole thing is so preposterous because these two black holes are supposedly 1.3 billion light years away.
Yeah, I know. Yeah.
And so, hold on one second. I had a phone ringing there. Just hang that up. But yeah, so those two black holes are supposed to be 1.3 billion light years away. Then that means all of the stars that are being distorted by their event horizon or whatever, or by their singularity, must be behind the black holes. And so to me, if I were one of the artists on that animation duty, I would have at least put a couple of stars that were not affected by that warping feature, just to give the impression that, not all stars are at least 1.3 billion light years away. In fact, the visible stars from the ground are only ranging up to around 3,000 or 4,000 light years. So we're talking many orders of magnitude further than those. So it's just ridiculous. I mean, it's absolutely ridiculous that they would use this computer generated animation, say that it's real, and then when you start to think about it, it doesn't even make any sense. So you're telling me that all of those stars are further than 1.3 billion light years, and there isn't one star between us and those black holes that's closer than that? It's just ridiculous.
Oh, that makes no sense. And what our closest star? I'll
really good point. Oh, sorry.
Look how far they say that is away. They want us to believe that everything is beyond reach. We're that far away from everything.
Yeah, and it has to be. It has to be for their numbers to work.
Yeah. They keep changing them, as you know, quite regularly.
They do indeed. It seems like everything sort of gets bigger and bigger as they go along.
Yeah, well, they've changed the sun's distance, haven't they? About 3 times. It was 93 now, but I believe back in the 50s, well, it was in the 40s or the 50s, they thought it was near 48. Is that right? They've changed it 3 times, the distance of the sun, in the last, say, 150 years.
Yeah, it has gotten bigger according to theory, and it's almost like it has to because It's just problems arise, and when you figure up their numbers, I mean, certain things have to be the way that they say that they are, otherwise the whole thing doesn't work. So, like, I don't know, just as an example, the Earth has to be traveling at the given velocity along an elliptical orbit in order for their whole model to work. And so if you can prove any one of those points is wrong, like if it's not spinning, then the whole thing falls apart. So it's that simple, but unfortunately, I mean, we're all very familiar with the cognitive dissonance that we're sort of facing when trying to sort of unveil this truth to the public, who want nothing to do with it because they're so much smarter than we, because they know, everything that we've been taught since we were 5 years old.
Go back to school, innit? That's what they keep telling us. Go back to school. That cracks me up, that does. Like, they're going to do the opposite. De-educate.
Yeah.
Right, and so the did you, Fran, you saw the black holes getting married and having a baby black hole?
I actually, since you said that, I wanted to share this page in a book. Can I, like, maybe put my screen on for just a moment?
Absolutely.
Since it's on a book, here, let me see if I can do this here. Let's see if I can do this. All right, so you guys, can you see that? So
yes.
This is a lot like what John was saying, where they swirl everything. Now, they don't say that this is a real picture in this book. They don't make that claim, but it's basically the same thing. They take everything and swirl it. There's no dimension there where there's some that are more forward.
Yeah, it's what he's saying. Yeah, it's true.
And, I could kind of see that making some degree of sense, because you got to understand that in order to see those black holes, you'd have to be zoomed in on an area of space, like, I don't know, according to us, microscopic. So that's how far zoomed in they are. So there might not be any stars, but I don't know, you'd think that there would be one or two if you're looking at an area big enough to view two black holes that I believe they said each of them was like 4 or 10 times bigger than the sun. So that's a huge area that we're looking at. And yeah, all those stars are further distant than the black hole event. So totally crazy. But yeah, in terms of CGI, that's all that is. They even admit it, and the guy who was presenting it said that they've convinced themselves that this is proof of gravity and proof of black holes and proof of binary black holes, all of these firsts in history all at once. I mean, isn't it just sort of just too much of a coincidence at some point? Looks like we've gained a couple of guests, so we'll just do a quick introduction. We've got Event Skeptic. How's it going, brother?
Hey, pretty good. Am I coming in clear?
You're a little bit faint, but I can hear you good.
Hey, it's good to be here. I've been enjoying the show so far. Yeah, let's keep it going.
Awesome. And then we've got Brian.
Hi.
Hi, Brian.
How's everyone doing?
Good. Good. We're flat earthers, so we're good.
Yeah, it's all good. So far, like the sort of topics that we've been kicking around a little bit so far are CGI, and we were going to talk about meteors. And actually, Brian, I was talking to you just a few minutes ago, and we were talking a little bit about meteors. But so what are you thinking, Martin, about the meteors being totally fake?
Well, I picked up a book. I didn't pick up a book. I've had a few years on Tunguska. Now, it occurs to me, like, I had an argument recently where somebody said, oh, you can get pieces of meteor anywhere. If you went to where that recent Russian one exploded, you could pick them up everywhere. Well, no, I read into it. They are ultra rare, and the value of them is outstanding. If you find one 13 centimeters wide, it's in the $60,000 mark. We're talking that sort of money. Now, there's only a few places on Earth they can go hunting. There are meteor hunters. They go to the Atacama. They go to the Bonneville Sand Flats. They go to these places, the Gobi Desert, and they spend endless amounts of time just staring at the ground to find these tiny little black specks. What I wanted to find out was what they're actually made of, because trying to think about the firmament. Now, some of these they say are stony, so alright, stone. Some are stony iron, and some are made of a very dense iron, almost a quark material. So, you know, incredibly dense, not neutron star material, obviously, but very, very dense ions. So I'm just trying to work out where the hell are they coming from. So then I thought to myself, well, if they're ultra rare, and most of the meteors are collected by the Vatican, because they have the largest collection on Earth, Pope John, not the last one, sorry, Pope Benedict, collected them all. He got them from the Smithsonian. He bought them all up. So I just can't help thinking that it's a fake. If there's only that many people that can find them, they're worth that much money. There's one in my local museum, the Welsh Museum, and it is literally 4 foot. It's a metre wide and a metre high, 3.5 foot wide and 3.5 foot wide. Now I thought, Christ, that must have left a hole like the Arizona crater. You know, it just doesn't ring true to me. I just don't believe it. I think it's a hoax.
Right, because the velocity and the density of the material are two huge factors, but from my understanding of physics is that velocity is actually a more important factor than mass or density. So, like in other words, when you double the velocity, you triple the force. I believe that's right. So, you know, you'd rather, if you're going to shoot a bullet, you'd rather have a smaller, faster bullet than a bigger, slower bullet if you want to get the most impact. So, yeah, some of these meteors, if it's, you said it was about 3 meters in diameter, if that bad boy's, sorry?
Do show signs of where they've been heated, and you get some meteors, I suppose you could say, bubbling from the heat underneath. So, you know, some meteors show you damage from re-entry. So I'm thinking, you know, hang on a minute, have they done the hoax to that extent? But some actually look glass-like, where they come through polished. You know, actually, where they've re-entered, they through the glaze. So that's quite intriguing. I've got a book with about, you know, 50 different examples. It's really interesting.
Theory I've thought of in terms of meteors, and this is probably sort of out there, but okay, so let's just hypothesize an infinite plane model where there's more land south of, you know, whichever, so we're not just confined to the Earth, you know, there's more stuff out there. Now imagine that outer area is volcanic, or so, you know, it's got a lot of volcanic activity. And not just regular old Earth volcanic, but super massive volcanic. And again, this is just a hypothesis. But suppose like that volcanoes from way south in one direction are, you know, ejecting materials far into the Iona plane, and then it's re-entering that way. I could see something like that happen, possibly.
Yeah, well, that'd work. It's a good hypothesis, I think that'd work. I found out 2 very interesting facts this week. Nostradamus was aware of flat Earth because I googled Nostradamus and flat Earth, and indeed he has quatrains referring to flat Earth. Also, I thought, oh, well, Edgar Casey must have known. He keeps going on about Atlantis all the time. So I google Edgar Casey and flat Earth, and lo and behold, he talks about flat Earth.
Wow, that's funny. Now, what was the date? I think it was Edgar Casey. He was the guy that he was basically channeling information where he could see, he could tell the future and tell things that were happening in distant places, and it turns out he was very accurate. But wasn't there a specific date where he claimed he couldn't see beyond? Like, wasn't it?
Yeah,
2012?
Yeah, that's right. He had he done 14,500 readings. He had this woman. She took them immaculately. Every single one of them is still existing in this institution. Now, he said that he couldn't see beyond this. I think it was 2012, but yeah, it was a blank spot. But he said that he could not. It was like a jump. He said he'd hit like basically hit like a wall, you know, which he interpreted as possibly being Armageddon, nuclear war, or whatever. Because I suppose he believed the nuclear myth. Although he died in 47. He must. Yeah, nukes were around then. So yeah, very intriguing man. And he never
theoretically, yes, theoretically nukes were around then.
Yeah, well, like 2 years, yeah.
Well, no, I mean, like, I'm under the impression, I'm about 90% convinced that nuclear weapons don't even exist.
No,
we don't have that technology.
If they existed, one would have gone off in the last 50 years for sure. Definitely. All of these dodgy Eastern European countries, all these, you know, countries who would just love to hurt us infidels, they would do it. Believe me, if they had what, they would do it.
Hey, can I interject there quickly? Hey, Martin.
Sure.
Sometimes I kind of wonder, could,
the quatrains and all of that also be predictive programming set up by the same people that wrote our history books?
Yeah, I thought it exactly the same today because it was 1500s and it's exactly the same time as the Renaissance. And he wrote the quatrains in the way that he did, so that in a type of code, because the Spanish Inquisition would have been on him. Yeah, so we had to do the quatrains. I have 3 different quatrain. I have a French, 15th century type of French, which is different from now, and the English translation. So you're quite right. Yes, bang on at the Renaissance.
But then my next point that I was going to bring up about it was the drawings and depictions that were drawn were, I believe it was his son that did the drawings.
His son, yes, they stay. They don't know.
He clearly depicted a wheel in the sky as well, which is quite interesting.
Yeah.
Just wanted to
the
bring that
wheels look very much like the wheels you see in. Have you ever seen Ezekiel's wheels?
Yes.
Depicted,
They look so similar to them as well. They're really similar. I kind of seen the similarities in the Nostradamus ones, and the Twin Towers obviously very significant. But these books came along. They're recent additions. I'm not sure where these have come from. They've just been found. I'm not sure. His son had done it, to be honest.
Awesome.
I know quite a bit about him. I've been to the place where he was born, Narbonne, in the south of France, in the streets where he walked. So I got, a bit of an epiphany. The first time I ever heard the word Nostradamus, it gave me a shiver.
Yeah, it is a little foreboding, almost like Nosferatu, right? The vampire Nosferatu, Nostradamus.
Yeah, he freaks me out too.
So, anybody else have anything they want to comment on either Nostradamus or Edgar Cayce and that sort of thing? I hear crickets. I'm going to do a quick screen share, and it was probably stupid of me to release my new video, like, I don't know, 30 minutes before our live show, because everybody's probably watching my new video on my main channel and not tuned into our live show. But we've got a pretty good audience so far, and hopefully that will grow as we progress. But let me see if I can do a screen share, get over to the right window, and screen share, and I will share my screen, and I think I have to make myself present to everyone, which I do. Okay, so y'all should be able to see my screen. Yes, no?
I see it.
Okay. Hopefully it's on the live as well. If anybody that's out there watching live doesn't see my screen with this nice imaginary picture of a galaxy, then just let somebody know and I will try to fix it. But okay, something that I've been sort of trying to understand better in the last few months is the relationship to the so-called galaxy with our so-called solar system. And you'll get sort of conflicting information on this. I was always sort of under the impression, and maybe I should have opened this in Photoshop so I could zoom.
Hey, John, real quick, Fran's image is on the screen in your profile.
Are you sure it's not just a delay?
No,
no, it's not. I'm watching and taking that into consideration.
If you click on my my little person there in the Hangout, you'll see it.
No, I'm watching on another screen the live broadcast, and Fran's image is up. That's what I'm saying. I'm monitoring.
Yeah, you're not presenting to everyone, Morgile. That's all.
Okay, let me do this over again, though. Sorry, y'all. I know.
That happened last show, and why is it always my picture?
I know, right? So let me stop presenting, and then let me present to everyone.
Well, I can see it fine.
And let me go back to screen share you. And can y'all see my screen now?
Yeah, man.
All right, and anybody in the live, well, I'll just,
I've got, I'll let you know.
Yeah.
There shouldn't be too much of a delay on the live, but it looks like nothing's happening.
I just saw it stop presenting, so I don't know.
Okay, I'm going to totally stop. Oh, let me present to everyone again. This thing is round earther.
Yeah, that happened to me too, Fran. I had to quit and come back into the Hangout because it kept me presenting, and it might be doing the same thing.
All right, well, I'll go ahead and leave and see if that helps.
Okay.
Okay.
And we'll see if it changes.
Okay, it looks like I'm getting that sort of infinite loop here, so maybe we will be live with my screen sharing soon. Goodness, you'd think they'd make it a little easier, but hopefully this will work. It looks like it's presenting. Yep, okay, so finally I'm presenting. It looks like Fran was the culprit, and now you guys should be looking...
There we go, we're good.
There it is.
Okay, so I was always sort of under the impression that this little diagram here on the bottom right was sort of the situation going on where, and again, we're talking theoretically in a heliocentric model. You've got the Milky Way galaxy, which is essentially a plane. It's more or less a plane. You've got this thing called the galactic plane and the galactic equator, which, you know, they're two different things which basically have the exact same definition if you look it up. I actually did go in and look up both of the definitions, and maybe I've got a slide for it. I can open up this one too, but anyway, to get to the point, and yeah, I'll preview this one too because it's also relevant, but let's go back here. Where's the one I wanted? Not you. Of course it's gone. Okay, here we go. So, excuse me. I was always under the impression that you know, the sun was going around in circuits around the galaxy, sort of, you know, in line with that galactic plane, and I was also under the assumption that, you know, the planets were going around the sun on essentially that same plane. But in fact, or in not fact, but in the accepted version of the lie, you've essentially got the solar plane, or the ecliptic, which is, you know, this plane where all of the planets orbit the sun, is actually set into the galactic equator at a 60-degree angle, which I thought was a little bit odd. Because again, you know, the Milky Way galaxy, it's a spiral galaxy. Everything is more or less set on a plane. Here's sort of a more three-dimensional look at it, and you can see that you know, the sun is traveling around this way at 500,000 miles an hour, but at the same time you've got the planets and stuff are orbiting in this sort of fashion here. And so what I'm going to eventually do, because I have done some 2D animations of basic orbital mechanics, but what I'm going to do is I'm going to try to do a 3D animation of this actually as it is supposed to be in the heliocentric model. Now, one thing that I sort of stumbled on, and before I continue, does anybody want to sort of comment or question on this whole galactic alignment situation going on here?
Yeah, I just wanted to make a comment that I've always thought that the orientation of things wasn't right.
Yeah, it's really, really bizarre because let me see if I can pull up the animation that I did. I'm pretty sure I can. It'll just take me a second. It would have been, let's see.
So wait. Basically, I could just quickly comment. So now
Sure.
we've got directional pull in an infinite amount of directions while traveling between two planes. Is that?
I just have trouble with it because of just the bizarre amount of motion that's involved. Because, like, when you look at a heliocentric model, typically you're just looking at like a top-down, you know, where the sun is stationary and all of the planets are just sort of going in circuits around the, you know, in circuits around the central sun. But when you put everything in motion, it causes issues. Maybe it'd be better if I just draw this out because I'm not finding the animation that I did, and I don't want to waste everybody's time.
Basically, the animation that shows the moon having to speed up and slow down its path, right?
That's absolutely right, but here's the bigger issue, and it's sort of hard to explain, and I do go over it in my new video, but this is something that you guys really should get a kick out of. Oh, there's the cover to the video. Don't you love it? Okay, so let me just delete this, and I'll try to demonstrate this as simply and as easily as possible. So let's see, where's my little circular tool? You see how prepared I am. So there's the sun. Obviously, that's going to be yellow. And you've got the Earth, which is obviously smaller than the sun, and it's blue. Okay, and then you've got the moon, which is even smaller still, and it is cheese. All right, so now again, the sun is going, if we're looking at the galaxy sort of like at the same cross section we were, like we're looking at the galaxy at its equator, the sun's traveling in this sort of direction, right? It's going this way, but everything's orbiting around it sort of in this kind of an angular fashion, like going this way and around. Now, one thing, in order to animate this moving and this orbiting this, right, and this orbiting this, you have to invert the speed of everything so that it's completely, and this is the technical term for it, ass backwards. Okay, so the largest, fastest object in this system is the sun. Okay, however, in order to get the animation to work, you have to make it the slowest body. Okay, now the next slowest body being the Earth, you have to make it faster than the sun in order to get the animation to work. And then the slowest body, the moon, you have to make faster than the Earth to get the animation to work. So just think about that for a second, because even when you do animate this, it causes issues to where instead of just like this perfect ellipse like you people tend to think that the planets make, they don't make that sort of circuit at all because the sun's in motion. So really the sort of path that they make is sort of sinusoidal like this. That's sort of a bad example, but basically like that. It's not going around in rings. And when you look at, God, I wish I should have just brought up the animation, but when you look at this sort of path that the thing takes, these longer arcs are the object going much, much faster. And then these shorter, sort of tighter arcs are essentially the object standing still and waiting for its host to pass by, and then accelerating to many times faster than its host to beat it around the front and then repeat the process over again. Now, keep in mind, the only way that this is even possible to animate is if you totally invert the speeds of the object. So the slowest object becomes the fastest, and the fastest object becomes the slowest. If you try to do it any other way, it absolutely does not work. And I do have an animation I can show you real quick that I just thought was kind of funny because it just sort of shows you what I'm talking about here. So let me just turn this down. And so, like, let's say this blue ball is a runner that can run 5 times faster than you. And you, the red ball, are 5 times slower than the blue runner, right? So how can you possibly catch up to the faster runner, run around in front of him, and then go the opposite direction, and then catch up? Do you see what I'm saying? You can't animate a faster object being run loops around by a slower object. And you know, the argument to that is that, well, it's all a fixed frame of reference, but that's hogwash. It's theoretical folly, and if you actually try to physically demonstrate what they're saying is occurring in terms of orbital mechanics, it is absolutely impossible, even in the sense where you turn everything backwards to make it work. So any thoughts on that? It was sort of a eureka moment for me when I realized this. But everything, and by the way, if you add the galaxy into the mix, so let's say this path here is the path of the sun, the galaxy is hauling ass through space this way at 1.3 million miles an hour, but you have to make it even slower than the sun in order to get this animation to work. So it's all impossible to animate, and it's physically impossible to have orbital mechanics. So there you have it. Any thoughts, comments on that?
Well, it's the Morgile effect, right?
No, that's when the moon should be visible only during the daytime for half of each month.
Oh yeah, but I definitely thought when I stumbled upon your work here with this, I thought for sure that relativity and reality are definitely two different things, and you clearly pointed out that this is impossible. If someone could demonstrate this type of motion with strings and balls, I'd like to see a representation of how this would work. That's all I wanted to say. Thanks.
Yeah, I thought you said it perfect, Morgile, when you said it's theoretical. It doesn't work in reality. They can talk about different frames of reference, and they'll say, oh well, it's like a truck driving in back of another truck. And okay, well then, if that truck that's in back of the other truck that has a truck that's orbiting it, regardless, at some point the moon is moving faster than the Earth. It has to get out in front of it and come back around the back of it, which is that alone is all you need to show. The rest of it is just added nonsense.
Yeah, and where it gets really sort of interesting is when you start looking at the angles that are involved, because I can understand something being considered a fixed frame of reference if it's moving in a straight line, and it doesn't matter if it's moving a mile an hour or a million miles an hour. If you're in a vacuum, that's a fixed frame of reference. But when something is traveling around a curve, and then it's got an object orbiting it as it travels around that curve, and then that second object has an object orbiting it, it just becomes so bizarre, especially when you've got this 60-degree angle to the galactic plane. You'd think that we'd have a totally different view of the night sky from year to year to year, certainly over hundreds of years. But to me, this little theoretical model is not what we see in reality. Thoughts, comments? Ready to move on to the next topic? Anybody?
I just say, I just find it fascinating. When you look up into the night sky, obviously you're looking into the galaxy. And when you look out into the horizon, you're looking out into deep space. But, all of this vast distances in eons of time that we're apparently made, how come we're always looking into the galaxy? How come we're never looking out? We're supposed to be on this arm Lemuria, or whatever they call it, fourth arm or whatever. Don't we ever change perspective where we're facing out and looking out away from the galactic core? It just never happens, does it?
Well, that's absolutely right, and I think that this little booger here, let me zoom in on a little bit, is a good way, a perfect way, especially knowing this whole 60-degree angle to the galactic equator. So like, let's say that's probably not Earth. Let's just say that's Earth. Okay. And I'm sorry, I know I don't mean to make you blush, Jaron, but this is the Jeranism effect at its finest. Let's say this is summertime right now. The nighttime stars would be up this way, okay? Because obviously if you're standing here on Earth, you're never going to see the stars during the day. Now, 6 months later, once you've traveled all the way down here, visible space is going to be way down this way. And everything in between, we should have a vastly different view of the galaxy and the universe from season to season. And then, by the way, all these angles should change from year to year, because every time we go around this loop once, this sun has moved, say, that far or whatever. So, yeah, it's just totally crazy. But if you take that out another step, if the moon is orbiting the Earth here, and it's always daytime on this side, then the moon, and it takes a month to orbit the Earth, then the moon should only be visible for about 15 days out of each month, and it would be the phases leading up to no moon at this point, and the phases leading back to about a half moon, and then it would be visible at night until it gets to the full moon, when it should be eclipsed far more frequently than it is. But yeah, so that's sort of the Morgile effect, is that we should only see the moon during the day for half of each month. And I'm really just sort of stealing Jaron's idea, but hey, it's another iteration of it. Right.
Yeah, and if you even look at things like constellations, I don't have the exact numbers, but I know Orion. One time I was looking into that, and they vary from something like 1 quadrillion to 13 quadrillion miles away. So you're talking about 13 times the distance, and the stars, even as they're turning, will remain fixed, which, you know, I might be able to agree or understand if they were all the stars in Orion were 1 trillion miles away, let's say. Well, then that would make sense to me that the constellation itself, as it turns in the night sky, could remain fixed. But when you say now that there are 2 stars in that same constellation that are 13 times difference in distance, and we know how far one is. I mean, one, you know, the closest star is 25 trillion miles away. So when you're talking about 13 times that distance, and then there's other stars and other constellations that might be closer to that 1 quadrillion, or closer to the 15 quadrillion, yet there is no change in what we know distance does. You know, there is no visual change, and that's just ridiculous. It's been put that distance so that they can get away with just saying, oh, well, we wouldn't notice it. But when you think about how far we're traveling, I mean, I just looked into it one time and took the amount of distance that we've traveled, and we've already traveled, in just my lifetime, we've traveled 25 trillion miles. So if we've traveled the distance of the closest star, then is every star also traveling at the exact same speed as our whole set is? There's no way. It would have to be each an individual set of distances or speed based on their particular solar system, just like ours has a certain speed. They can't all be identical. It's just all nonsense.
Yeah, and well, the thing is like, okay, so here's our galaxy and here's our little solar system, and this is not to scale. The solar system is nowhere near this big. It's just showing you the angle which we supposedly orbit around the sun in relation to the galactic plane. But in terms of you know, traveling all these vast distances and not seeing any sort of stellar parallax, I totally agree with you. Now, you'll get some science nerd that says, oh, we do see stellar parallax because there might be some case where, like, one star moved a micro-inch or whatever. But what I'm talking about is exactly like you said. Let's say this star here is 5 light years away, and let's say this star here is 50 light years away. When you even if you're standing right here and spin around, the one that's closer to you is going to appear to pass through your field of view faster than the one that's further off in the distance. That's just how reality works. And so what it tells me is that the stars are all essentially more or less on the same plane. No star is any more distant than any of the other stars. They may vary slightly, but we don't see any stellar parallax in terms of stars changing their relative positions, and that's where I believe you get the whole root of the word constellation, is the fact that they are constant. They don't change. So
I think you have to go back at some point and realize how they determine distances, and unless it's different from what I'm to understand, is at point A, they get a lock on where the star or object is, and then 6 months later, they get the maximum counterpart, and through that small triangulation is how they determine distances. Is that not correct?
yeah, I believe that is correct.
So and you're talking about just a ridiculous sliver as it is, just getting the trillions, and now they start going into light years.
Here's the funny thing. They actually they actually say that that's how they used to get the distances, but now they're much more accurate because they use lasers.
What?
Look it up. They bounce lasers off of stars and get the distance.
Precision nonsense.
Now wait a minute. So if a star, even the closest one is 4 light years, right? 4 light years, is that right? Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
So it would take 8 years to get a reading.
So they're reading the photons off of the laser, is what you're saying.
Yeah, let me look it up real quick. I'll get right back to you.
Yeah, and the way that I would understand it is if they're going to shoot a laser, light can only travel at the speed
Hang on,
of light.
186,000 miles an hour. They're going to have to shoot that laser at.
Yeah.
I'll come back in a couple billion years and we'll get a reading on it.
That's just not going to work.
Well, that's right, and the other thing too is that if I'm not mistaken, you're going to have to wait for information to be relayed back through that beam. So yeah, it would take 8 years, I believe, to get a reading from the closest star. Now, if you're talking about those black holes that are 1.3 billion light years away, then something like that, if you were to try to get a reading on that, it would take 2.6 billion years to get your data back.
But regardless, it's still through a triangulation process that has nothing more than 150 million miles at the widest point of the triangle. So whatever the apex is on that triangle, whether it's trillions of miles or trillions of light years or whatever, it's still the base of that triangle is still only 150 million.
I misspoke too. Sorry, that's planets. I was thinking planets. They use lasers to get the distances of planets.
Okay, and that's local planets in our solar system, or they're talking about like other galaxies?
No, I was reading something the other day. It was talking about how they got the accurate distances. I was just thinking stars, but it's planets that they shoot supposedly lasers off and then get the response, and they can measure the distances that way, which is still nonsense.
Right, and of course their readings will jive with exactly whatever the theory postulates at the time.
But how many photons are getting bounced off of your object? And I don't know what the farthest planet is supposed to be, but again, you have to. If there were that little nonsense with the two guys where they said they were getting the laser off of the moon, saying that they're only getting 4 photons on the return signal. Again, so they're shooting a huge shotgun and they're getting a couple BBs back, and just the moon, which is supposed to be only 265,000.
Well, no, they were bouncing off the lander, the moon lander. No,
there's a box on there that bounces it back. Apparently, Apollo put on the moon.
Jaron, what was your spread on your laser?
Yeah, exactly. Bob's talked about that before too. It's just too funny that they even claim that. They kind of try and hide it in the show, but if you go back and watch, they send up a couple quadrillion. I don't know if it's 2 or 3 quadrillion, and then they ask how many do you get back, and we get 1 to 3 back, and they don't mean they mean 1 to 3 out of 3 quadrillion, which is just ridiculous. If you do the percentage on that, it's 0.0000001%. So if that's all they can do with 240,000 miles, how are they doing it off of even Mars at 30 million?
Yeah, or Jupiter, 365 million minimum.
But if it's in the internet, it's got to be true.
Yeah, really. Yeah, it's gotten to the point to where it's like if something is said on one of the big major networks, then it must be true, and anybody who disagrees or even questions the mainstream narrative is obviously a crazy conspiracy theorist. So, yeah.
Sorry. I had a topic I wanted to interject with. I haven't really heard talked about too much, and that's redshift.
Yes.
Sure, absolutely. I'm certainly no expert in it, but isn't that sort of like a Doppler effect with light?
Basically, I can give you my version. Basically, the basic version is it's the brighter objects are redder in the sky, the further they are moving away. Is that correct?
Yeah. Yeah, the red shift is they're moving away into infinite space or whatever they're saying it's moving into. They don't really know. And if it's slower, then it'll show us green, lower in the light spectrum.
So basically, what I'm screen sharing is scientist Halton Arp. So it's like basically he found what, in his opinion, was the biggest proof against the Big Bang Theory, because he found objects that were closer, near galaxies, that were performing brighter redshift lights than the distant galaxies, which completely threw the whole Big Bang motion through the universe completely, because they used the redshift to determine the distance viewed into the night sky. So when Halton Arp realized that the quasars were in line, and only when you put the quasar in the projected path as it's closest to us instead of on the outside of the universe, you get the expected coordinates with it. I don't know if I'm explaining this properly.
No, you're doing well. I understand.
Yeah, you're saying it well. And they also think, because when they measured with redshift, every galaxy came back at over 15 billion light years, which they don't say the universe is that old. So then they had to redo everything. So they don't really use redshift anymore. But regardless, we kind of do know that redshift would mean, theoretically speaking, that everything is moving away from the Earth. So if you are able to stand somewhere and you look in every direction from you, pretend like you're in a parking lot, and everywhere from you, every car is moving away from you, so you can see that based on the color of the light that's hitting your eye, then how can you then say that every place, which is what they have to say, every place in the universe looks the exact same from that position? Meaning somebody 10 light years away, when they look out, they see everything moving away from them as well. That whole thing is just nonsense. What it really means, even if you believe in the astronomy that they give us, is that we are the center. That everything started here. It's the only way everything can be moving away from you, and no matter which direction you look.
Yeah.
Well, you know, it brings up, I believe it was Sagan in Cosmos. He actually did a pretty good job of defining an infinite universe, and I always sort of liked this way to put it. If you think of the universe as infinite, the center of it, the center point of it is everywhere, yet the circumference of it is nowhere. So makes some sort of sense, but then again, it's all just theoretical skullduggery. But and one thing you had mentioned before too, Jaron, is that all the stars within our galaxy are basically spinning around, theoretically spinning around the galactic center and relatively maintaining their relative distances from one another. Now, each galaxy, however, is theoretically independently traveling, every one of them in different directions as a result of the Big Bang. So I sometimes sit here and wonder.
Sorry, we just disproved that, though.
Didn't the W map doesn't actually show that, does it? The expansion of space.
No. And the other question I have is the temperature. And I know Jaron had Robert Sanginis on. I couldn't believe it, but yeah, basically he said they measured the temperature of the sky, and it came back equal.
Oh.
It was like 2.4 or 2.3 Kelvin. I didn't know if anybody, like, basically you would think if it was an expanding, never-ending universe, there'd be variations.
Yeah.
I think I'm still presenting if you want to unpresent me, Morgile. Thanks.
Sure. Yeah, and so, yeah, redshift is something that I have looked into a little bit. I really haven't dug deep into it, so I'm sure that there's somebody on here that can talk a lot better on that subject than I can. It is something that I definitely want to learn more about. So if there's anything anything interesting else y'all want to talk about redshift, yay or nay, crickets. All right, so let me unpresent you. All right, and then I'm going to go back and try to present and screen share.
Yeah.
Yeah, Sanginis definitely was a little perplexed with the whole topic, and oddly enough, the whole axis of evil and everything that was discussed in that movie, The Principle, basically blew my mind. And the Yoda's channel, you've shared it, and I hope everybody got a chance to see that. That's basically where I was going with that. Sorry, I'll mute.
Well, I totally agree. If you haven't seen it yet, flat Earth, ball Earth, whatever you convert. Convex, concave, doesn't matter. You need to watch that movie because it does show, especially if you have any respect at all for astronomers or physicists, then you need to watch that movie and you'll see exactly what has happened to astronomy. And it's obviously something that the lovers of NASA and the lovers of science have not allowed themselves to realize yet, is that astronomy has backed itself into a terrible corner by always pushing their results in the direction of what they want. They're biased. They tried to stay away from God. You've heard the quote a million times, I'm sure, by Hubble, who basically said that they wanted to do whatever they could to stay out of the horror of the situation of being the central Earth, to being the center of the universe. And so they pushed all of their findings and all their data into one direction. Well, now they've kind of backed themselves into a corner that there is no way for them to explain what they've already built as a foundation anymore. So they're stuck. And what they have to go to, and I'm telling you, it's going to happen, is that they have to go to multiple universes. They have to go to that. It's the only thing left.
Even right down to Rupert Sheldrake exposing the fact that the speed of light changed from 1940 to 1952 in the minds of physicists.
Well, it's no longer 186,000 miles per second. They changed it. They said it's a bit quicker now, apparently. And it's not regular either. They reckon it alters its speed.
Now, isn't it constantly diminishing in speed though?
Apparently, this is their new finding. This is just recently, in the last few weeks.
That would be the law of entropy would state that everything declines, right?
Yeah, that's right. That's what I go on.
No, I'm talking about like going back to even Airy's failure and stuff. I believe it was Airy who noted that the speed of light was diminishing considerably, over his lifetime of studying the stars. But I could be wrong about that. But yeah, I'm pretty sure that that's what happened. I believe I'm presenting again, and this kind of has some similarities to redshift, but this is just because it has to do with light. We're talking about gravitational lensing, and hopefully y'all can see my screen. So
and that's their proof for it, is it? The light from behind a star from behind the sun gravitationally lensed, and they spotted it. Is that their evidence? Is it?
Bending the light around the sun.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's so funny because to me, I've got a little theory here, and I wouldn't put it past them. So eclipses have been studied since ancient Mesopotamia. I want to say it was back in like 1500 BC or something like that. It was about 3,000 plus years ago. So people have been studying eclipses for a long, long time. And so let me just sort of read what I had written out for my little video. But people have been studying eclipses since 1374 BC in ancient Mesopotamia. That's over 3,000 years of observing eclipses collectively. Now, I'll pose the question, do you think it's possible that one or even possibly many astronomers noticed that during an eclipse, nearby stars appear to change their position? Now, if so, that would mean that Einstein possibly took a known observation of eclipses, which happens to contradict the theory of gravity, mind you, and he dressed the said observation up as a prediction, and voila. Not only do you, quote, prove, quote, gravity with your prediction, but you also preemptively squash inevitable refutations to relativity by actually using this disproof of the theory as a prediction to support the theory. Now, if that's the case, isn't that dubious? So, for people, anyone want to comment on that idea? Crickets on that one, really?
No, I'll comment. Oh, sorry, the crickets got me. It's definitely a classic experiment that was set up with the pre-notion of the outcome. And isn't this take us back to the double slit experiment, where they state that once you observe an action, you therefore change the reaction? So is that what we're seeing in these tests? I'm confused.
Well, so you're being facetious?
Yeah, kind of, but I still don't understand how. I'm confused.
Well, this is what I'm saying. I believe that Einstein knew either, because honestly, I think Einstein was probably sort of a puppet. He was sort of a buffoon, and he was easily manipulated. And
you realize his wife was a famous physicist, and she'd done a lot of his work for him. You do know that, do you?
I'd believe it, and you got other cases like Cavendish, who was a total recluse. And it seems to me like he was propped up and possibly even a totally fabricated character by the Royal Society. And there seems to be like this lots and lots of dubious stuff going on in terms of theoretical physics. And what I'm saying is let's just say hypothetically that the inner circle of people knew that this occurs, that this phenomenon occurs during eclipses. And what they did was they took that known phenomenon that nobody else knew, only a few people knew about this. They took that known phenomenon, realized that it disproved gravity, and they cleverly stuck it into the theory of relativity as a prediction, which, lo and behold, on the next eclipse, it became true. Now, I've got some slides here.
Well, it was Brahe, right? Tycho Brahe, who they stole all this off of. Copernicus, no?
I've been reading
I'm
about
not
Tycho
sure.
Brahe. I've done a bit of work on him. Yeah, he's really interesting. Some of his observatories, really space age for his age. Really interesting guy.
If gravity were true, what we should see is and let me back up the wagon here, and I'll just explain the whole deal. Obviously, you can't see the stars during the daytime because the sky is blue and the sun's in the way. However, during an eclipse, the sunlight's all blotted out, so you can catch a glimpse of the stars for a brief period. And what occurs during an eclipse is, let's say that there's a star right here. When the sun passes by it and then gets eclipsed, something happens so that star changes position and appears, well, it should, according to gravity, it should appear to get closer to the sun because the light is coming from the distant star, which should be sucked in to the light to the sun by gravity. Now, what we actually see is the opposite of that. So what we actually see is, let's say that the star during normal circumstances would be here. During an eclipse, it goes way over here. And so what they're saying is, they're saying that, again, this is occurring. They're saying that here's the actual star. No, I'm sorry. Here's the actual star, and when the light travels towards the sun, the gravity bends the light around, and then it continues on its straight path through, straight space. And so the star appears up here. Now, again, they knew this was going to happen, so they predicted it was because of gravity. Now, what should happen, though, here's my saying of what should happen, and I borrowed this phrase from Brian, so thanks, Brian. Planet stupid. This is hypothetical lensing and attraction due to a force similar to gravity. So assuming gravity was true, that star that's behind the sun, you're not going to see it. The star that's slightly above the sun and its light waves come near that sort of event horizon, and it is a valid term to use for the sun. I always have to qualify myself when I use the phrase event horizon because some people think that it's exclusive to black holes. The term event horizon is just another way of saying point of no return, and so when I say the event horizon of the sun's gravity, I mean the point when the light gets so close that it's just basically inescapable and it's going to get sucked into the sun by its gravity. So this is sort of what we should see, I believe, and actually there are lots of other theoretical physicists who happen to agree with me, and I didn't even know this until after I sort of did these diagrams and started researching it. So I'm not the only one saying this. So this is what we should see if gravity were true. This is what we do see. So this disproves gravity and actually shows that the sun is sort of repelling the light around it. I mean, there's definitely something going on, but I can see this being akin to an electromagnetic field and not having anything to do with gravity whatsoever.
Yeah, I think you could do this test with a lighter, basically, right? And objects around and around it.
Yeah.
Just
bounce around it, the heat in it, yeah.
Well, you know, the sun is supposedly this huge, massive, just mind-bogglingly. This is not to scale. Like if the sun were this size, the Earth would be like a microscopic dot somewhere over in the next town. If that were to scale, right?
How many Earth masses is it, Morgile? Is it 4 million Earth masses, the sun?
I don't know. I forget. I've started to because there was a time when I was having to, and I mean we still obviously do. We have to know all our facts about both models in order to argue this. But at some point you have to start setting aside the failed theories. You just have to start pushing that stuff out of your mind. But I think that isn't it 110 widths, like the diameter of the sun is 110 times that of the Earth?
It's 1.3 million Earths. Just a quick Google.
Well, that's quite a few.
So, yeah.
Yeah. Well, good
What
thing.
a joke.
Good thing for Google. So I guess, well, the Earth is a ball. We can all go home and we shut the show down early. Right. Anybody else have thoughts on gravitational lensing? Because to me, this is I don't put it past these societies, these secret societies of astronomers and royal clubs to have secret information and to use that secret information against us. And really, I mean, let me just read this again, because this is what I do honestly believe occurred, and I'll just read basically the last end of it. So if it's possible that they knew this sort of effect happened during eclipses ahead of time, that means Einstein took a known observation of eclipses, which happens to contradict the theory of relativity and gravity. They dressed up these observations as a prediction of their theory, and poof, voila! That not only they killed two birds with one stone, they supposedly proved gravity with this backwards prediction, which they knew was going to occur, but they also preemptively squashed any inevitable refutations to relativity by someone actually discovering this this lensing effect, or this apparent drift of stars during eclipses, as disproof of their theory. So they packaged it all nicely as a prediction. They killed 5 birds with one stone, and now, what, 60 years later, we're finally just now figuring out that they were just dubious liars the whole time. Yeah.
I think that's money to me. Sorry. Beautiful quote.
Righty. We've definitely got other topics. Anything anybody wants to talk about while I'm in between topics?
Can you guys hear me okay or no?
I can hear you now.
All right. One thing I think we should talk about, just because it's a couple days away, is what people have to say about the eclipse, and also the meteor that's supposed to, or comet that's supposed to fly by the Earth, which originally was the 5th. It's supposed to be today, but NASA changed it to 3 days, which right away I don't understand why people aren't furious at that. If you can't guess the trajectory enough to know when it's going to pass the Earth, and you're off by 3 days because they moved it to the 8th, which just so happens to be the same date as the eclipse. So to miss by that much, and then they also say estimates right now are between 19,000 miles and 11 million. So yet they say they know it won't hit the Earth, but your estimates are between 19,000 miles and 11 million. And if that's the case, how do we know it's not going to enter the moon's orbit and to get caught in the Earth's? It's just so ridiculous that they expect us to believe this crap.
Yeah, I totally agree that gravity, again, all of this stuff with gravity was theorized long before electromagnetism was understood. And so, all of these invisible forces that they couldn't make heads or tails of, they had to, think of reasons that certain things were occurring. Like, what goes up must come down is a very simple thing, but, if you actually think the Earth is a globe, then there has to be a reason for it, and that's where they get all their wild theories. But, so, wait, what you're saying is this eclipse was scheduled for the 5th?
No, not the eclipse. There's an eclipse on March 8th, which I think you have to be basically in the Pacific Ocean to see.
Yeah, West Australia, Pacific, Indian Ocean, Southeast Asia.
Right. And then there was supposed to be
Catalina?
the asteroid TX68 was its name. And originally when I looked into it, it was the 5th. It was supposed to go by the Earth and come real close to it. Closest asteroid we've had in a long time. And then most recently I looked again, and it now has been changed to the 8th. So it's like they moved it to the exact same day as the eclipse. And then on top of that, they say it's coming from the sun's direction. So sorry, nobody can see it. We can't judge it. All these different things. When it's so, I mean, we have these telescopes that are supposedly out and wandering about the solar system. They can't look back and see the direction and the trajectory of this asteroid to know if it's going to be between 11 million or 19,000 miles.
Yeah, and it's I'm looking here. Wait a minute, this must be old. You said TX68? Is that right?
Let me look it up. That was by my memory.
Because I'm looking at one for 2013, asteroid 2013 TX68.
Oh, that's its name because it was discovered in 2013.
Okay,
Yeah, right.
so
It's
I'm
not the
reading.
date.
Okay, so I'm a reread. I know. Astronomers say large asteroid will miss planet by at least 15,000 miles, but could pass through its ring of orbiting satellites. Now,
Yeah, so all of our satellites could be taken out in 3 days.
No, well,
right.
they said it. They said it's 100,000 now or whatever miles. It's been changed.
Right. Well, I mean, they say by at least 15,000 miles because they understand, and honestly, with gravity involved, I don't see how anything getting that close to a body the size of the Earth could ever miss it. But that's just my personal hypothesis or my personal stand on it. But they say that it's going to miss us by at least 15,000 miles, but could pass through its ring of orbiting satellites. Well, if it's going to, let's just say that it did miss us by 16,000 miles, then it would definitely pass through the ring of so-called orbiting satellites because the geostationary stuff is, what is it, 22,000 miles out? Isn't that right?
No, wait a minute. You're confused. I don't know. I'm a little bit confused with 15,000 miles is nothing.
Nothing at all. That's right. It might as
Are
well.
you sure it's
Yeah.
115,000 miles? Because that's well within 5% of the distance between here in the alleged distance between here and the moon. So I don't know. I look at the bigger picture. What's going on is they're conditioning everyone to get used to, hey, these meteorites are coming close, and we have no idea how to predict them. And I have a feeling it's going to tie into a bigger event, and we're just getting conditioned for it because, well, everyone's
The
paying
Messiah.
attention. Huh?
The Messiah.
Well, all of a sudden now we've got O.J. Simpson finding a knife on his property, and every time something like that happens, it's a big red flag for me. Is something's going to happen? Because I mean, everything's cooking so much right now in the Pacific. There's the world's largest historic, what do they call, training session going on in the Pacific, where something over 75 countries are involved with. And again, you hear nothing about it, and who knows the source that I'm hearing it from is credible or not, but there's so much going on, and then all of a sudden to hear that there's this meteorite about to fly by 15,000 miles, it's like, holy smoke, something's going to happen where they'll say it's a meteorite, but
Yeah, exactly, because I'm reading something here on the Daily Mail, and it says, could pass just 15,000 miles from Earth on Sunday. Latest prediction shows it will fly by 3 million miles from our planet. Small chance it could pass 15,000 miles above Earth. What the hell are they talking about? How can you say above Earth? There's not up and down in space.
And I guess the explanation, I would say, according to them, is because of the unknowns of like things with gravity. Like they can see its trajectory, but there are some factors where it's like this whole what is it? Sort of like the law of chaos or whatever, where certain things can happen slightly differently depending on conditions. But a point that I totally agree with you on, Jaron, that you just mentioned that I think is important to sort of unpack because it's totally related to this whole thing, is how we don't experience gravity at all. I mean, obviously we experience what goes up must come down, but we don't experience the gravity of the center of the galaxy, which should be the most powerful gravity field in our vicinity. Because remember, this is a gravity field that's powerful enough to keep the sun going around in circles in a, basically in that warp. Now, my point of contention is, at what point does the Earth, follow around in its little trajectory around the sun, and then the moon insert? Whoops, I just changed the whole ecliptic. Sorry. The moon in one certain condition, it could happen that its velocity takes it into this ripple, because again, this is a ripple in space-time.
Okay,
it's
okay,
not
wait. I gotta
a
ask
path
a
of the
question.
sun.
Do we not set our clocks and calendars to the moon?
We do, yeah.
So then, how would that even factor in? So time speeds up and slows down? Just wanted to interject there. Sorry.
Well, yeah, technically, we should see all sorts of wild motions of the moon if it was actually going on like they say it is, because again, it's not going in circuits, it's going in a sinusoidal path when you animate it. Let me make that red so you can see it. So like there should be times, because we're spinning and the moon is going around us while we're moving, yeah, there should be times that it should appear to retrograde, because it's standing still, yet we're still spinning. And then there should be times where it appears to really go fast through the night sky. And then there should be times when it goes and totally stops through the night sky. And then there should be times again when it retrogrades. And again, that's all based on the heliocentric model of us spinning and the moon doing sort of an elliptical, sinusoidal, animated circuit around us. But that wasn't even the point, though. My point is that this the gravity generated by the theoretical galactic center is not exclusive to the sun. The sun is just reacting to the reality that is caused by this ripple in space-time. Now, the moon is not immune to that. And so what I'm saying is, under certain velocities, under certain conditions, why don't we lose and gain objects in our little solar system all the time? It just doesn't make any sense that the gravity of the galactic center only affects the sun, and the gravity of the sun only affects the Earth, but not the moon, and the gravity of the moon only affects, the gravity of the moon only affects the Earth's tides, allegedly. So yeah, it's just like the more you dissect this and unpack it and try to understand what's going on, I mean, it's just the less and less. I mean, not only is it not plausible, not only is it not, probable, but it's totally impossible. It's a mathematical certainty that this model is wrong, and this whole thing is stationary. So thoughts on that in terms of the gravity waves of larger objects like the galactic center not being exclusive to the sun?
Hey, John, can you hear me?
I can.
I've been having a lot of technical difficulties. So you guys can hear me now?
I can hear you now.
I had to restart my entire computer. I don't know what happened, but you guys couldn't hear me, then I couldn't hear you, then I couldn't see anything. It was pretty bad.
Oh, well,
Sorry about that.
We got you back.
I think God's trying to tell me I need to get going because need to get with my son. But but before I go, I kind of feel like I wasn't really contributing very much. And John, if I could screen share just for a little bit, I'd like to contribute a little bit before I go.
Yeah, absolutely. Let me stop presenting, and I will make you the presenter. There you go.
So as you guys know, I'm the reading rainbow of flat Earth. So here I am with my books. So you guys were talking a little bit earlier, John, about the bending of light with the sun and all that.
Yeah.
So I have this picture here, and when you see these pictures of books, it's because I may or may not use them in like future videos. And in this case, I don't know if I was going to use this, so I'm glad I can share this with you guys today since we were kind of talking about it. But what caught me weird is about what it says is that it kind of has like double speak to me, because in one part of this section here where it says the bending of light, and it's got the star, the sun, and the earth, and the sun is between the star and the earth. In that area, it says that that the sun, warps space-time. Okay, it's supposed to have like this massive effect on space-time, but then right down there at the very bottom area, it says with the sun's relatively weak gravity. What? Weak gravity?
Yeah.
When does the sun have weak gravity? When it suits them? So it's just kind of, when you read things like this, it just drives me nuts, you know. I'm like, you're not making any sense. In one section you're saying that the gravity is so strong that it can do this, and then in the next section you're saying, well, it's really weak, and that's why the positions don't move that much, because it's weak. But it's strong enough to do it, but so weak that it's not very big. You know, and
Yeah.
just drives me.
No, I totally agree, and it's been a point of sort of contention for me for a long time, because there's this doublespeak, especially when it comes to gravity. You know, yeah, because
seeing
gravity.
It all the time with gravity, especially.
Yeah, it's supposed to be very, very powerful. I mean, you got to admit, if something as massive as they say the sun is, if something that's millions of light years away, I guess the galactic center is pretty damn far away, can cause an object that massive to, you know, spin around in circles forever, that's a very powerful force. Now, one thing I think is funny, and I'm sure you guys know this, but to me it sort of plays into this whole thing with Einstein knowing about gravitational lensing prior to his prediction. Pardon me, I got a frog in my throat. But the sun is, I'm sorry, the gas helium is named after the sun god. So what happened is, and I need to research this because I'm sort of half in the middle of understanding this, and maybe one of you guys knows about this already, but okay, so they named helium after the sun god Helios, and they attributed, like, you know, the properties of helium. You know, they say that the sun is made mainly of helium. And so don't you think it's, I mean, to me it's just...
Yeah, that's a coinky-dink, isn't it?
Yeah. It's kind of
you gotta
funny.
love those coincidences.
So that's right. I mean, is it a coincidence, or is it that they discovered helium and they named it after the sun because helium gas displays some properties when light passes through it of the sun? And I think there's something to that. But no, I totally agree. I think that they're sort of back engineering their model to sort of they cover their tracks as they go, to make everything seem like it's logical. Like, helium's been around forever, and the sun's made of helium, but when you realize that they actually named helium after the sun god, and they named the sun after the sun god, then it's no wonder they say the sun is made of helium. For all we know, it could be made of nothing at all. It could be an electromagnetic, you know, capacitor.
Yeah, isn't it, John? Yeah, it could be.
Yep.
Anything. I've got words for it.
And also one more thing before I go. I'm so sorry I gotta leave early. Oh, sorry about that. Okay, one last thing. I wanted to talk a little bit about these occultations, and I really wish I could stay a little longer to hear more about what you guys say, but let me read a little bit in this book here. Because you guys were kind of talking about observations made a long time ago, and this book has a little bit of information about this from what does it say here, 1783. So so basically this Sir William Herschel and his wife were looking through a telescope, and his wife said, they're the stars in front of the moon, and he said, let me see that telescope. And he took the telescope, and he's like, well, I'll be darned. The star did appear to be in front of the moon before it finally became fainter and fainter and vanished. And this phenomenon has been observed and noted in the past other times as well, and they kind of talk about that in this book. They bring up like 2 more examples of that occurring. And then they do get into a little bit about the grazing one, where they say that during the occultation, when the sun, or when the star goes by the moon, sometimes it kind of flickers because it's near the mountain, or the mountainous surface of the moon, or whatever, like the texture of the moon.
Right.
So, have you guys witnessed this, or do you know if any of our wonderful flat Earth moon watchers out there have any footage of this or anything?
You know, I wish Bob was on because he's been working pretty closely with CD from what's the channel, Jaron? CD's channel? Do you remember? I
It's
think.
CD, isn't
Yeah,
it?
CD, I watch it, yeah, CD.
It's just called CD, right?
Yeah.
His
Is
channel.
it? Okay, I thought it was
Yeah,
maybe
I
something
think
else.
so.
Jaron, you're
Yeah,
muted.
CD has good stuff. I didn't know if you
Jaron,
knew
you're
somebody
muted.
like him or anybody else that had any footage of this occultation, occurring, like maybe where the stars are in front of the moon or anything like that.
No, the Crow 777 has done some work on that as well, but he hasn't. I haven't seen any definitive. I think Eric Dubé was the only one who showed a video, I believe, with stars showing through the. Maybe Dabu 7. I don't know. Sorry.
You know, one thing that I thought about, and I just sort of mentioned it just in the video I just put up today, so it's funny that we sort of hit on some of these topics, but what about, and this is just a theory, but what about possibly light reflecting off of that dark side of the moon, and it's not actually a star passing through it, but just another source of light reflecting off of it? Or you know, if the moon may be sort of reflective to sunlight only and translucent to other, you know, bandwidths or frequencies of electromagnetic waves or other frequencies of light. So yeah, there's definitely some mystery there, and a lot further study needs to go into it. But what year was that book published?
This is an older book, and I'm sorry, the book's actually downstairs, but it is an older book. If I had to guess just off the top of my head, I think this book was published in the 1980s. It's an older book. It's called Moonscapes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yep. That's very
but yeah,
interesting.
it's an older book, so you know that makes it nice because I'm finding that, especially when it comes to the images that I'm finding in books.
Hey, Bob.
Oh, hello.
I guess Bob. Speak of the devil, we got Bob on.
Bob, hey Bob, what's up?
I couldn't stay away.
Love him. Good job, Sue.
And now I gotta go. Oh my goodness.
I know, but
But
yeah.
yeah, I am noticing that in the newer books that they're trying to push the curve harder in their images. In a lot of my older books, you know, even pictures of quote-unquote space, the horizon was flat, and I did show some of those in my original video. But I know that as I've noticed a trend that the newer the publication, the more likely I am to see a curve on a horizon.
Oh yeah, well because when was the fisheye lens camera invented, right? I'm pretty sure it'll coincide fairly nicely.
Oh, I'm sure.
Yeah,
And you know, whoever invented that, I'd like to just shoot him in the face.
Fran, on your thing about the gravity, again, John, and you addressed this, John, and you're spot on. It's not that it's gravity that's bending the light waves around. It is the light following the electromagnetic flux lines of the source of the magnetic source, excuse me, and that is absolutely demonstrable, and that's really the way it's going. And as far as being able to see starlight through the moon, I don't really believe that you can. I think when that's been observed, what it probably is like if you guys have ever watched some of the moon footage that I've shot, you know, with the Nikon P900, and you see when you look into the moon, it looks like it has a very crystalline structure, and so there are points of light that look very much like diamond inclusions, if you will.
Oh, the moon sparkles in places where I
very much
almost wouldn't even expect it to sparkle sometimes.
Right, and I would guess that is more likely what we're seeing than actually seeing stars through a transparent moon. Just my thought on it.
Yeah, it's possible that because these observations from, you know, from what the 1700s and so forth, they made these observations, but they didn't say whether or not they watched the star, you know, previously to the moon. Like you don't have the full story, and at least in that book, I didn't get the full story. But they do say that these things can be predicted because you can predict the movement of the stars and the moon, so you can actually predict when this may or may not happen. And if I remember correctly, in some of my research, this has been recorded in modern times.
Yes.
And with somebody that was expecting to see it, and they were able to record it.
Right. Now, I have a friend, Chris, here in Colorado, who does a lot of photography of the moon, and he sent me a picture over one night where, he said, "Is this what they're talking about?" And you could see what appeared to be stars right through the moon. So what I did is I asked him, when he took the picture. Actually, I knew when he took the picture; he had just taken it, and I pulled up my Starry Night software and I looked from the Denver perspective to see if I could get any constellation matches to the moon. And unfortunately, the answer was no. Which brings me back to the idea that these are points of light inside a crystalline structure of the moon.
Yeah, or it could be reflected off of a sort of a sharp angle if the moon is of substance. I think the moon could be of substance because of the phases, but I also think it's a lot smaller than we think it is, because you know how, like, whenever you view weather balloon footage, the moon always looks really, really, really tiny. And like Jared, that show you did basically refuting that whole SpaceX, the totally bogus launch that Red's Rhetoric was like fanboying.
Yeah.
The moon was just like a tiny little dot.
Yeah, every time we see it, it usually is, but then you'll find other space station footage that shows it huge. So it's just garbage. But, I mean, Fran, also, my wife and I, it was probably back, I'm going to guess, mid-December, when Venus was supposed to go behind the moon, and it all took place during the day, and we video recorded it. It clearly went behind it, and then you could not see it until the exact time where it popped out from the other side.
Okay, so it all occurred as predicted?
Yeah, the only thing that was weird about it is the time seemed off, and it's something I never really dug deep into, but because CD was taking it from Florida, right, Bob?
Yes, he was taking it from Florida.
Right, he was taking it from Florida, and I can't remember. There was a difference in the time that was huge. I'll have to look at it again, but we saw it go behind the moon before he did, and then we saw it come out, and it was a good another hour before he saw it come out. It just didn't make a lot of sense. It should have coincided, we thought.
Yeah, given the alleged distances, correct? You would think.
Right.
Because you're, in California, and he was in Florida?
Yeah.
Yeah, and that's not very far in the grand scheme of things.
No, not when you're talking about
their grand
distance.
scheme of things, anyway.
Right.
Hey guys, I love you guys, but I gotta get going.
Aw, God bless.
All right, friend. It was been real and fun, and I will hopefully look forward to seeing you next week. And yeah, no worries at all. We've still got another hour and a half to go, but everybody, feel free to come and go as you please. It's certainly no rules here at the round table. Well, I don't know if it's round, but it's definitely a flat table.
Yep. And Fran, just so you know, I kind of felt that you were the one that was eminently qualified to be discussing redshift. Just my opinion.
Yes, I get it. Oh, okay. See, I'm slow on that. Okay. No, I'm like, yeah, I could have said some stuff, but I think what was said, covered it pretty well. So I didn't really felt like I had much more to add to that. And then also I had technical difficulties, because then there was another question that was posed and nobody could hear me. So
But do you remember what it was?
No.
Oh,
I can't remember what it was either.
Aww.
You guys had you had thrown something else out there, and then you said crickets, but it wasn't crickets. I just nobody could hear me. So.
Oh, well, I guess what it probably was the thought that possibly Einstein knew about the ahead of time about the effect that he attributed to gravitational lensing and predicted this known effect that's known to these inner circles of astronomers but not known to the layman's, and so he cleverly sort of used that as a prediction to prove his theory, even though it actually goes against the theory of gravity.
Right. Yeah. Okay. It might have been that. I don't know. But I did bring up a little bit about that. I showed you that book, where just another example to put under my belt of, gravity is strong and gravity is weak. Just. All right, guys. I really gotta go. I'll catch the rest of the show offline later.
Take it easy, Fran. We'll talk to you later. And yeah, that's a good one to kick around a little bit if you guys want to. Just how strong is gravity and how weak is gravity? It's so strong. And I always have fun of thinking of things either at the equator versus at the North Pole, right? Because at the equator, supposedly you're spinning around at 1,000 miles an hour. With a radius of curvature of 4,000 miles, roughly. And if you do the curvature calculations at that rate at the equator, you're going to be vertically falling, like going down a roller coaster, not just your eastward momentum, but falling like down a roller coaster at 135 miles an hour. All day long, all night long. And I just think that that's kind of funny that gravity is strong enough to keep us, perfectly level and balanced on such a roller coaster ride. Yet when you go to the North Pole, where you're not spinning and you're parallel with the axis as opposed to perpendicular with the axis at the equator, you don't really experience any sort of difference the further north or south you go of the equator. So any thoughts on that and sort of how strong is gravity, or how weak is gravity, or how real is gravity?
Oh, go ahead.
Yeah, well, I've got a book from her from 1880, and it's a physics book, and the first chapter's on gravity, but they include ether, which they don't anymore. I suppose they dropped it around the turn of the century, I suppose. Heisenberg and all them came along, but they sort of say as a force it's pushing rather than pulling, if you know what I mean, like pushing down rather than pulling down.
Yep.
Because they're not really using the mechanics of the molten core at that stage in 1880. To read that book in the language they're speaking, it's hard to believe that they were that, well, dare I say, that backward only 130 years ago. It's mind blowing to see how far we've come in that short period of time from that physics book. It's just crazy, really. I'd love to read it. But it's in another language. It's hard to understand, the 1880s language. It's all in thus and thous, But,
yeah.
Wow. But the conspiracy still goes on in the book as well. It's still a heliocentric model. It's still the same old thing,
Well, you don't find many books. Zetetic is obviously a good one from the late 1800s. And you had some stuff that was done in the 20s, and really I think that the final nail in the coffin for for the last 50 years or whatever was kicked off by Operation High Jump, where they finally figured out 100%. If they didn't know before then, they finally definitely knew then that the Earth wasn't a globe, and so that's when you really had the whole space race stuff in order to basically keep us perpetually stuck in this lie version of reality.
Yep. And one other thing about gravity, John, as I continue in my studies about the electromagnetic model, Martin, you're right. It appears to be more of a pushing down force than a pulling down force, and it is directly related to the density of the field itself. In the magnet. As you go out further, as you go out in the centrifugal range, out into the magnetic flux lines, gravity, or that effect of gravity, which is actually electromagnetism, becomes less and less and less, because the lines of force become dispersed further and further out. And then as you come in towards the centripetal side of the electromagnetic wave, it becomes denser and denser and has more of a pushing force. Now, this is really interesting, and this is something I'm going to present tomorrow on Globebusters. But I have come to the conclusion in looking at the magnetic model that there is a zone above us that essentially these electromagnetic waves become at equilibrium. And again, this is totally demonstrable, and there is also a way to get into this zone, and I will demonstrate that also. And in this zone, you can kind of float things around perpetually, where we could conceivably put satellites. Now, before anybody goes crazy on this, I have to demonstrate the model.
I'm getting you. No, I'm trying to think of that source. What could be that source to create it? I've been trying to envision it myself, and I know exactly. I'm working on an electromagnetic model myself because, I mentioned before I'm into the work of Immanuel Velisovsky, and he wasn't popular in the academic community before anyone shouts at me. But it works. It works.
Yes, Velikovsky was definitely onto a bunch of stuff. So. I'm glad to hear that somebody else is working on this model, Martin, because I believe
it makes sense to me. I'm trying. The trying to work out the physics of the actual sun itself. Well, if it is plasma, which I believe that it is, but I don't believe that the words that they're using in science. I don't think it actually explains. It's just words, isn't it? It's words for what they think it is. It's not.
Right. Now here's the caveat to this gravity. Because of the fact that you have the intense centripetal and centrifugal magnetic flux lines basically at equilibrium up there, you are still dealing, in order to get through there, you're still dealing with a full spectrum electromagnetic problem that includes X-rays and gamma rays. So what that means is we could put equipment up there, but biological material, forget it. In other words, people can't happen. So thus the fakery in NASA, but I believe that there is absolutely a way to put something that we would call satellites. Now, it's not going to be anywhere near the distances that we're talking about, but I kind of posited before that, and when you get up into that area, and not only is it very still because there's not a whole lot of atmosphere, but you also have this equilibrium of magnetic force that will allow you to float an object basically in that area. Yeah. So it's amazing, and again, all this is demonstrable.
Yeah, and I also think that it's possible to sort of create the necessary, maybe this is the wrong phrase, but sort of interference wave patterns here on the ground and sort of create a similar equilibrium where you could possibly, lift extremely heavy objects with ease, just with, changing the sort of harmonics to the electromagnetic waves in the environment. And yeah, I've always sort of kept a reservation for the possibility of something like orbiting satellites, but not orbiting around the globe. They're, if they're traveling at any speed in a curved linear path, it would be concentric with the North Pole, but that's just theory. I believe that even without the electromagnetic issues going on, just the simple fact of once you get above all of this barometric pressure, you're going to lose most of your weight on a scale just because you don't have all that huge column of air pushing down on you. But yeah, it's all still pretty much a mystery what's going on up there. But when you mentioned the equilibrium of the magnetic lines, the magnetic flux lines up there, and if it's possibly somewhere near the lower magnetosphere, that would make a lot of sense in terms of those ionized plasma tubes. If it was magnetic fusion plasma in those tubes up there in the lower magnetosphere, which is about 600 kilometers up, then they could potentially reach temperatures of 10 to the 8th Kelvin. So that would be a problem for biological material and, just any old object, I think.
Well, yeah, but again, you have to realize that, when you're talking about those temperatures, you have to have a medium to be able to perceive those temperatures, like, some sort of an atmosphere. And it would be fairly thin, so I can see where that would be a problem. But you're dead nuts on when you talk about, it would be above the, what we're perceiving as the magnetosphere. or the ionosphere, and it is getting above that region where the where the centrifugal lines are becoming further and further spaced out. And there are definitely concentric rings to every magnetic pattern. And it just so happens that when you start looking at this bowl-shaped magnetic model, that you get these null zones that actually trap particulates. And again, because it would be full spectrum, that would be the thing that prevents NASA from being able to send any sort of manned craft up there, because it would be completely deleterious to human tissue. So yeah, really interesting thing, and I've got some great video on it and some great slides and stuff that I'll be showing tomorrow. And it also explains a lot about what we're perceiving when we look south and see the south stars. And I'll give you a little bit of hint about that right now, but the bottom line is the reason that we're seeing the stars at the equator diverge two different directions is because we're seeing that from the point of the divergent lines of magnetic flux that are coming off the plane. And again, demonstrable, absolutely 100%. And then when you get out into the light manifestations themselves, these are magnetic type manifestations that would be at super high frequency cymatic type frequencies, if you will, that actually manifest in the light realm. So I'll be covering all that tomorrow. But boy, I'll tell you, magnetics is where it's at, guys.
Hey Bob, real quick, I apologize, I'm not real familiar with what the model you have going on, but quick question. For the magnetic north, how do you have that reaction? Is it anodic or a cathodic type charge that you've got going on?
Magnetic north would be would not,
basically,
well, the Earth is the cathode. The Earth would be the cathode. Let's put it that way. And so the regions above the Earth, going up to what I would call a kind of a bowl-shaped, would be the anode. So we would be the anodic side.
Just throwing something at you. How about if you had the North Pole as anode and the perimeter as the cathode? That's kind of what I'm working on.
I'm sorry, you broke up. The what is the cathode?
The perimeter.
The perimeter is the cathode.
The Arctic ring.
Well, now that's an interesting thought. And
then that causes the split for the shift at the equator, that you've got the rotation going north and then the rotation going south.
Absolutely right, yes.
And, oh, go ahead.
And remember, electricity and magnetism are at 90-degree angles from each other. So actually, yes, that would be a very, very good model, and that's one that I've also considered and am considering looking at that. And I think you're right on. And not only that, when you look at where the actual magnetic quote-unquote poles are, you find that the South Pole is around 67 degrees south, and the North Pole, it's a little more accurate, but more towards the geographic North Pole, but still not yet. That's not quite right. And so this is the reason why we have the skews and why they've built in this tilt, this 23.5 degree tilt to the Earth, to compensate for this model. Of our poles actually being off, so that they could fit this into the grander scheme of things. So I think you're definitely onto something.
Well, the tilt for me was that the stronger between the Earth and the atmosphere, that the Earth was the stronger negative and the air was the stronger positive. So that way you've got a inner-outer perimeter charge that's balanced at the equator. And then between the ground and the air, you've got the more positive up in the air. So then in your XY, looking down on Earth, flat Earth, your XY is split between the North Pole and South Pole, and then your Z, which is the ground and the air, is that you've got the charge with the air being the more positive and the ground being more negative, and that way you can create a zero balance between the two. That's what you're talking about, is the neutral zone. So now I can suspend something at the equator and elevate it between the Earth and the air, And that's kind of where I get they're coming in with a magnetic north and true north is the difference in that charge. Now, believe me, I have no magnetism, well, personally, but education-wise, very little with knowing about magnetism. But that's kind of what I'm using to answer how things might be able to not levitate, but to get something suspended in air and then gyrate it in a circular path.
That's really interesting because we have to aim our satellite dishes in the north to the south and aim from the south to the north, which would be the equivalent of aiming right towards the equator.
Good point,
Right.
Jern. Good point. Yes.
Hey, let me, if I can share something real quick. It's just a 2-minute little piece of film from an older documentary. Let me see if I can get this going here. Okay.
Yep, and I set you as presenter.
Okay, tell me if you see this black screen here ready to play.
Not yet.
Okay.
I like your new logo.
Hey, thank you.
Yeah. Okay,
Still not yet?
We're seeing it in the Hangout, and it should be live here shortly.
Okay. And you should hear the sound. Just tell me when it starts if you do hear the sound.
The training programs. We would, of course,
we hear it.
Instructions to our supervisors on how to handle reports of UFOs, but it's not included in the training of a controller.
So I suppose the only way in which it would be included would be in I assume you admonish these people to be
They're talking a little bit about UFOs here, but what's important is right after this conversation.
And make the pilots aware of what they're aware of. And to this extent, it would be included.
I've seen this clip before.
Procedures.
After $60-odd billion spent for manned spaceflight by NASA, it has been determined that man is truly confined to this Earth. The incredible secret, concealed from the tax-paying public by both NASA and its congressional masters, is that man cannot participate in long space expeditions.
Oh.
NASA has scientifically verified and kept very quiet the fact that the unstoppable cosmic rays to which every astronaut has been exposed destroys brain cells at the rate of 1% every 4 months. Since the neurons of the adult human brain do not reproduce, a space expedition represents irreparable brain damage and would reduce the crew to idiots in even the 8 years it would take to go to the nearest sun and return.
Buzz Aldrin proved that.
That was my point too.
Exactly.
Oh my God! What a find!
Now there were two juicy bits in there that we could kick around a little bit. Now the first thing they were talking about is UFOs, and there is definitely a talk to be had there, which we can pop back to that. But so now, do you know who was the producer of that documentary? Was that like a mainstream sort of CBS thing, or?
It starts off and says it's scientific something. I'd have to get you the exact name.
What year is it, Jared? Released? What year was it released, that clip?
I'm going to say 78.
Really?
Yeah.
Denying space in 78? That's incredible.
Let me find out exactly for you.
Yeah, and if anybody wants the link to that video, it is in last week's Globebuster show links, show notes, because that's one of the ones that I had highlighted, because I thought it was pretty damn funny when they said, yeah, they would just come back complete idiots.
I know.
Yeah, because for 1% every 4 months, sometimes they stay up there a year. Well, then you just lost 3% of your brain. And some of them have done multiple tours. I think the one that spent the most time in space was like 2 years or something. Maybe.
Right, and if it's 4% per, what is they said every 4 months, right?
1% every 3 months, I think.
Yeah, okay, so and we're only using 10% of our brains in the first place. Well, that's gonna what's Scott Kelly gonna be like when he comes back, right?
Well, Kelly came back this week. Did people catch that?
Oh yeah, he did, right?
And then wasn't that great where as soon as he came back into Earth that the 2 inches he had gained, he shrunk down. It's like, why stop at 2 inches? You could have just said you're 9 foot tall up there, and then he came down and all of a sudden it all went away. So.
Yep. So
if he about that too, you can't find any footage of the Soyuz landing, and this is the kind of thing I try and talk about, that if something were real and it was legit, there would be so much footage of every part of it just for them to prove that what they're saying is true, and you got to watch it. The thing leaving space is a joke. Then they show it kind of going through a white-looking atmosphere, and the next scene is from a helicopter, and it's the pod coming down with the parachute already up, and then it descends, and the next thing you know, they've got the crowd of 50 people there pulling the guys out of the little capsule. There's no footage of it landing. I've been looking and looking and looking for it because it's something, since I've started watching the Soyuz, I have a big problem with the way it lands. It's too crazy, the speed. It would absolutely kill anybody inside of it, but I couldn't find any footage of this one.
Makes no sense. How that pod would couple with the station makes no sense. How would you even find it? How the Soyuz, how do they know when it's just above? Do they just pinpoint it exactly, then send the Soyuz up and it exactly meets, the space station going at 27,000 miles an hour and couples to a tiny little coupling? I just can't see that being a reality ever.
Yeah. So a question. Oh, I'm sorry, Jaron. Who's married to Gabby Giffords? Is it Scott or Mark Kelly?
Mark.
Too bad. I was thinking, God, when Scott Kelly came back, he should be about the same brain power as Gabby Giffords. Okay, I didn't just say that. I'm sorry. Go ahead, Jaron.
Oh, that's a good one.
Hey, speaking of which, with all that, I couldn't find anything on where the launch was to grab Kelly. Where did that come? I found nothing from what
the thing was up there.
Oh.
So when the Soyuz goes up, then it docks, then people get out, and then they're there, and then a couple months later, then people come back on the same thing. So now the next group to go up will go back up in another Soyuz, then that will dock, and then another group will come down later in that same.
The taxi cab was up there, and it came back down.
But another thing is, if you've ever watched any video that shows how tight that whole space is, every time they show them going from the space station into the Soyuz, they're dressed in regular clothes. Then they go into the Soyuz, and next thing you know, they come out when they get to Earth, but they're in astronaut gear. So you're telling me those 3 adult males change clothes into spacesuits? I mean, the whole thing is nonsense. Even if you look at the whole Apollo missions, have you ever seen now when they go out on spacewalks how it takes like 2 people plus 2 more to basically gear them up? Well, remember, if you're talking about Armstrong and Aldrin going down to the lunar surface, they only had each other.
Armstrong and Aldrin going down.
But that whole thing, the deacon was they had to climb through the shield to get to that area.
Yeah, well, I mean, how would they get dressed? As soon as one person had the gloves on, how can somebody then zip up his partner?
Why wouldn't he chuck it out the door? We've seen the film.
Yeah, if you think about it, it's impossible for 2 people.
I know it's impossible. It's ridiculous, isn't it?
Because if you've got your glove on, then you can't zip up yourself. And if the other person has his glove on, then he can't zip up you. So there's no way to complete the sealing of 2 different people if you both need to be sealed.
That's why they had technicians up there to help them.
Yeah, exactly.
I was just looking into something because I was trying to figure up, when they landed on the moon and the first time that little capsule, they launched it off the moon, it looked like, I don't know, like a pogo stick or something. It just popped off, and then you see it, then somebody films it going up and up and up, and they keep tracking it with the camera, so they left someone on the frickin' moon. But I had always seen that as very odd because, remember, the moon doesn't have any of the atmosphere that the Earth supposedly does, right? So if the Earth is supposedly a sphere and all the air is sort of an enclosed system with the vacuum of outer space sort of kept separate from us, so we're all in this enclosed, compressed system, When you launch a rocket vertically up, they say that it doesn't start apparently heading west because it's traveling with the atmosphere, you know, along with its eastward angular momentum. Now, that's on Earth in an enclosed system with atmosphere. Now, on the moon, however, there is no atmosphere. You're basically standing on the moon in space. There is no atmosphere. So when they launched that thing, it should have apparently started heading in the opposite direction as the spin. But when you start looking into, okay, well, how fast does the moon spin? According to the conventional narrative, it takes it approximately 27 days for it to rotate once on its axis. Now that leads me to another point of contention. Gravity, or rather our weight on a scale, is a combination of symptoms of gravity, which is pushing in or down on you, and the centrifugal force of the spinning body, which is pushing, basically wanting to push you out away from the center. And so you basically have this balance going on with gravity and spinning. Now they say that since the moon is, you know, so much smaller than us, the gravity would be much less, but since the damn thing is barely spinning at all, then wouldn't it seem like you would that would count for something, like that you don't have that outward centrifugal force, at least at the equator, to where you would apparently weigh more. So I'm a little bit confused, and now I'm starting to want to get into the advanced you know, calculations to see, because again, if you're standing at the equator on Earth, traveling eastward at 1,037.5 miles an hour, that's just your eastward velocity. And okay, so you maintain that momentum, but you're also dropping vertically around a curve at 135 miles an hour. So gravity has to be the equal and opposite balance of that, at least, to keep you stuck to the Earth. So the gravity, you know, of the moon that's barely spinning, something that takes 27 days to spin once, I mean, that's slow as hell. Does anybody follow what I'm saying?
Yeah, I totally follow what you're saying. I get it.
Wow, that makes a good point.
Yeah, you'd think that, because they say that you have 1/6 gravity on the moon because it's about 1/6 the mass, but they don't factor in any of the spinning at all, which obviously we don't here on Earth either, because, you know, a ton of coffee at the equator weighs about a ton at the North Pole. So that's totally against gravity. So, you know, it's just everywhere you look, it shows that NASA's been lying. And when you see the old movies like Capricorn 1, which again, I do have that up on my Google Drive. I've got it linked up on my main YouTube channel. And for anyone who hasn't seen Capricorn 1, it's a must watch. But yeah, it seems like they've been calling NASA out on BS since the 70s.
Yep. Oh, there we go with those crickets again.
I'm surprised they left that film out, Capricorn 1, you know. It's so close to the mark. It's incredible they released it, isn't it?
It really was. You know, I fell in love with that movie years ago and had the DVD forever.
James Brolin, yeah, it's good stars in it too. Yeah.
But isn't that part of their protocols to kind of daunt in your face what the deception is, and at least put it there and kind of then laugh because they're not smart enough to figure it out?
Oh, absolutely. And beyond that, it's in the symbology everywhere, and that's something else I'm going to be presenting tomorrow. When you look at Masonic symbology, I have come to the conclusion that a high percentage of it is related directly to magnetic wave patterns. And I'll be showing that. I mean, it is so in our face, it's beyond belief. So
I'm looking forward to seeing it. I'm seeing a lot of spirals, and I'm thinking that's linking to DNA, because I'm studying their artworks myself.
Yeah.
Very much linking it to flat Earth. I'm convinced they know, definitely.
Oh, they definitely know. And there's also another really interesting little thing that that may help us to solve the actual layout of the Earth, and it has to do with converting. Mathematically inverting the sphere into its opposite form, which I'll also be talking about. So really, the more I look into this stuff, the more I see everything ties back to magnetism, not just the entire Earth plane model, but all the symbology, Everything is there. It's just in front of our face everywhere. It's amazing.
Yeah, yeah. The puzzle's starting to fit a bit better these days, isn't it?
Yep.
It really does, and in terms of the Freemasons, that's something that's been talked about a lot. And I've been researching the Freemasons and the secret societies for a number of years. I've come to the conclusion, and now let's specifically talk about one dude in particular, because Parallax, Dr. Robotham, he's been getting a lot of flack, and after he wrote Zetetic and he went and did speaking tours and stuff, going around proving the Earth to be a plane back then, what they did was instead of refuting his actual information and disproving his facts and observations, they went and attacked his character. Okay, and so there's all kinds of rumors and stuff, but one of the big ones that's going around about Robotham is that the dude was a Freemason. Now, one thing I'll say is that, first of all, not all Freemasons are, evil, nefarious oligarchs. In fact, most Freemasons, even today, the average Freemason is of the Blue Lodge, which means he's either the first, second, or third degree. The third degree is the Master Mason, and to many a Mason, they believe that is the highest degree to get. They're led to believe that they know all there is to know, or basically all there is to know about Freemasonry, until they pass some sort of initiation ritual or figure something out, and then they get to traverse beyond the third degree. And even at this point, they're not like evil oligarchs. Now, going back to the 1860s, when Robotham wrote Zetetic, if he was a Freemason, that would have been similar to, college kid whose parents have money that went to a decent school, joins a fraternity. In fact, it's the exact same thing. And for Dr. Robotham to be a Freemason isn't that big of a surprise. That's if you, and not to be racist or anything, but if you were a well-off white dude who wanted to have a career in anything scientific or in building or anything, you were going to be a Freemason, period. So that's just sort of the way things worked back then. Now, I'll also point out that the Illuminati does indeed have its roots back to 1776 in Bavaria, but I believe that really the occult, sort of magic, really the dark sides of Freemasonry were supplanted a bit, or possibly invented, or possibly exacerbated by Aleister Crowley, who, by the way, wasn't even born until 10 years after Zetetic was written. And so the point that I'm trying to make here is I'm not apologizing for Robotham. I could care less whether he was a perfect angel or whether he was an alcoholic or, a Freemason or whatever. The information and the observations that he documented in that book were very well done. And, if you can refute any of the points that he made or any of the proofs that he made, then have fun. But really the only thing that people have against flat Earth is the first line of defense against it is willful ignorance, and we're all aware of that. People will basically ignore this on purpose, so you've got that. But then the second sort of tier of defense against this whole flat Earth movement is you're never going to discredit the information. So they have to try to discredit the people. And they will also try to pit us against each other. And so I just think, just because somebody is a Freemason doesn't make them a bad person. Now, if somebody's a 99th degree Freemason, then yeah, I guess they probably would be. And apparently, yes, there is such a thing. If you guys aren't familiar with Bill Schneblin, he's got some very interesting talks. He's done some stuff on the Prophecy Club, which, agreed, is questionable. But Bill Schneblin claims to have been a 99th degree Mason, which means he went through both the Scottish and the York Rite, as well as became an ordained Catholic priest, a satanic priest, just all sorts. The guy's life, if you believe him, and I do believe his story, but he's basically been there, done that with all this crazy occult stuff. And even he, after it was all said and done, I believe he is of Jewish descent, but he ended up becoming, against all that stuff. Now the dude's a Christian, you know, repent, whatever. So the point is we can't necessarily say, you know, the Freemasons are all evil, because most Freemasons are just average, honest people. If you go to be, if you're in a skilled trade and you work with building contractors and you decide that you want to become a contractor, a really easy path to that business is to join the Freemasons. It opens a lot of doors for you, gives you a lot of opportunities, and so that is sort of the reason why most people join. Now, I'm not saying that there aren't nefarious, elite, secretive people at the top of Freemasonry that probably have a nefarious agenda. I believe that is indeed the case, and that can probably be said about all sorts of you know, large institutions, for example, the Vatican or the United States government, or, you know, the list goes on and on, the mainstream media, and it really appears that all of these pinnacles of all these different pyramids sort of merge at one point, which is very close to the Freemasons and very close to the Illuminati. So, you know, there's definitely a connection to be made there, but I just think it's an important point to make that, you know, you know, that we can't be looking for evil underneath every Freemason rock, is all I'm saying.
You're right. I agree.
Yep. So I guess you have to be a 99th degree Freemason. You have to be, what, a 33rd degree in 3 different lodges, or?
I guess. Yeah, I've watched a few of Bill Schneblin's talks. He'll go on for hours, but some of the stuff he said seems a little fantastic to me, but some of the stuff that he said rang very much true. And so, if nothing else, I think it's good. He's a good anecdotal source of information because he is very knowledgeable on the occult and, you know, all their inner workings and stuff. And so, you know, I hate to be a medium for this whole externalization of the hierarchy. I don't intend to do that, but at the same time, we really do have to understand what we're up against. You know thine enemy, and be wise as serpents. And so, you know, in studying this stuff, it's important that we, you know, just try to keep a level head, try to understand that the vast majority of people, I believe, are honest and decent and good. It's only a few at the top that are aware of these secrets that are manipulating us for their personal gain and for our perpetual servitude.
Okay.
I'll play bad cop. Everyone's evil.
John, can you present me, because Jaron wants me to show you guys something?
Yeah, sure. Give me 1 second. I'm getting pretty good at this.
Yeah, you catch on to it after a while, right?
There you go. All right, so there, I just made you presenter.
All right, beautimous. Okay, Jaron, let's see. We are presenting. Go ahead.
Scroll down about 3 pictures. I was reading this about these guys being in space, but watch this next picture. I just pointed out to my wife, and we're dying here laughing. Look at this picture.
Oh my God!
What the hell is that on NASA for? Look at the little. Look at the caption.
I know. Oh, it's sad, isn't it? Oh no, that's just.
It just flat out says that it's some astronaut in the space station in Mir, but there's no window there.
No. Don't need for the window.
Well, there's a small, looks like a circular ring, sort of like right around here. Yeah. I would imagine that they're going to say, "Oh no, that's the window. That's the window." But
God.
You know, if this is anything like the airlock hatch that Antonio Subarats showed on the Apollo LEM, where it's all flexible and everything, and it looks like it is. I mean, look at the back of it. Look at the back of that thing. I bet you that's another one of those silly ass, you know, flexible hatch covers.
That is hilarious.
Can you send a link to that over? Because I want to check something out. Because based on where the light's coming from, if there was any sort of glass in front of him, you would see a flare, like a.
You would think it's in the chat, John. It's in our chat. From Jack.
Well, thank you.
No, there's no glass there, John. There's no reflection, nothing. It's glaring off of the portal cover. But there's nothing. If there was a window there, it'd be glaring off it, and there's nothing.
Why would there be a window there? What, are you going to climb through that window and then be in that little tiny segment before you?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
No. And what is that big giant? I don't know. It looks like a spiral. I don't know, like a spiral.
Concrete funnel.
Yeah. What is that?
I have no idea.
I'm going to pop this image into Photoshop real quick and just see if I can find anything interesting. But that's really funny. Another topic that we can or we don't have to talk about if you guys want, but it was brought up, is UFOs.
Mm.
This is something, you know, I don't know about you guys, but I've been sort of into UFOs for many years. It's always been sort of a matter of intrigue to me, and you know, I think that's probably not by accident. It seems like, you know, the government has sort of played the role to create this, you know, this fantastic mystery around the UFO phenomenon. Now, there may actually be a UFO phenomenon, or maybe not, but what they've done is they've created this mystique around it, you know, with like Project Blue Book and stuff, like just really glossing over it. You know, I've got my theories on this, but does anybody want to throw something out there first, or should I just be the one to just dive in head first with my theory on it?
Well, sure, I'll jump in. What the heck?
All right.
All right. So here's what I think UFOs are. I don't think they're necessary. They may be unknown or unidentified, but that's only to the general public. I believe that we have had quote-unquote UFO technologies for a long time, probably back as far as the 40s. I think that once they discovered electromagnetic anti-gravity type devices and how it can be manipulated, that they started manufacturing these things en masse, and now they've gotten to the point where they're getting incredibly large, kind of like the large V-shaped craft that was seen going over Arizona and ultimately terminated, you know, above that mountain in Phoenix. So I think that they keep these craft under wraps, because if what Werner von Braun told Dr. Carol Rosin, his assistant, was true about the final card being the alien invasion UFO type of technology, they're going to be essentially using these craft along with advanced weapon systems, like I believe you know, Judy Wood hypothesizes that were used on the buildings on 9/11. Whether that's true or not, and I'm beginning to think more and more, sorry fakeologist, but I'm beginning to think more and more that that technology is absolutely real, especially when you look at the John Hutchinson effect and how this, you know, can be achieved. It's demonstrable. So so I'm thinking that, you know, we're going to have this alien invasion event, and they will be using these high-tech weapons, you know, vaporize you know, a good portion of a city or something like that, to make it really believable, because people are going to say, oh my God, we don't have that type of technology, when in fact we do, and that's one of the biggest reasons it's been kept under wraps. As far as, you know, aliens or extraterrestrials, sure. I mean, the universe is probably ultimately a big place, you know, outside of our little dome here, or outside of our little planisphere, or planet's plane. There we go. And see, the programming runs deep with me sometimes.
Really, though, the good thing is, though, is planet works, because planet can actually be used to describe a plane, so we can stick with planet.
Yeah. So anyway, so yeah, I think that UFOs, like I said, they may be unidentified to the you know, great majority of the populace, but the government knows what's going on, and I think this is all part of the grand scheme of things, and that's what I got to say about it.
Yeah, they've got the new introduction for the Independence Day movie coming out, kind of going back to, was it 95 or 96 when the first one came out? And so they're kind of this slow generation of new alien invasion movies that are supposed to come out, and this gets back to the people that really push the Truman closed Earth. Is that it seems like the conversation has extended to a superior race or a intelligent race, and they're sticking to that. And it seems like it's really opening the door with those with the loudest voice are really presenting that there's you know, away from the theological aspects of a creator and more of a superior intellect that's out there. And I'm just waiting for the door to open even further, and again be the gateway for that type of alien event.
Yep. Yeah.
Awesome. Anybody else want to chime in with anything about UFOs? Because I do.
I will quickly.
Go ahead.
Yeah, hi Ben, brother.
Hey everybody.
Yeah, what's happening?
Hey,
Yeah,
Martin.
I can honestly say that they definitely exist. I can't say that I've seen alien greys, but I can say that ongoing, right the way through my life, I have had encounters with UFOs from the age of 8, maybe before, right the way up to just a couple of years ago. And yeah, you can either call me a liar or call me delusional or whatever you want. I am a flat earther, but I can honestly say there is something going on. I don't know if they're projections. What I've seen is just full on the real McCoy, right up close. And I've made no secret of it. I've said all the way along. From
The
the beginning.
physical being you've seen up close?
No, I haven't seen no greys.
No, what did you say you saw up close?
Or goblins. I'm sorry.
You said you saw something up close. What did you see up
Well,
close?
the last one I seen was actually with my wife. She seen it first and said, you know, what the hell is that? And I looked up. I looked out the window. It was 5 o'clock in the afternoon. I jumped out of my skin, and it was I could have thrown a stone at it. It was that close. 200 foot away, 100 foot away, something like that. The size of a stadium.
Yeah, Martin, I've seen UFOs on 4 separate occasions that I would call UFOs. Of course, now I believe I understand what they are.
I was right, but I could feel it. I felt the engines through my body, or whatever it was, like the harmonics or whatever.
But
Right
what did you see?
Sorry?
I'm losing what you said you saw it, but what's it? What did you see?
Well,
a craft or what?
it was a giant UFO with big black ribs down the side and multicolored lights, the colors that I've never seen before. I have no reference for. That spooked me. I only seen it for about, I suppose, 30 seconds. It went very, very slow, moved off to the north, and disappeared into a slit in the sky.
Yep, that sounds very similar to what I saw, Martin. And in fact, this wasn't that long ago. Cammie and I were sitting out in our hot tub in the backyard, and we were looking up, and all of a sudden, a craft appeared above us, and it had multiple colored lights. I think like red, green, and blue lights.
It was orange color. It was searing.
Right, and it was in a V pattern. It was in a V pattern. It was completely silent. It was there for, I don't know, maybe 2 or 3 seconds. It's just a fraction of a second, and then it just disappeared, just like that.
Hey, let's pop back to this in just a second. Looks like we got Matrix Decode on. So Matrix, if you're able, you want to say hey and say how you're doing.
Hey John, yeah, and hey everyone. Yeah, it's good to be here. A bit late on the show, but it's been a great show so far. I mean, touched on so many cool topics. I mean, from you know, the Scott Kelly, you know, growing 2 inches. You know, to me, he looks more compressed. His neck looks more compressed on the ISS than anyone else.
He looks like a professor.
You know, how the parachute, you know, how it did not get ripped off when it's traveling at those speeds. I mean, on the, you know, on the capsule that landed. You know, and you touched on Freemasonry as well. I mean, I think that's kind of been demonized a bit in the conspiracy world. I think there's probably something. I think it's something that people should, you know, can look at. I think it covers so many different aspects of our existence and philosophies and things like that. I think it's quite an interesting subject. I think it's been. I think there's a lot of. I think it's been made to look more sinister than perhaps it is, but I also think that there's it's been infiltrated and being used in a nefarious way on various levels, and you know, especially with like NASA, and you know, there's definitely something suspicious about what's happening with Freemasonry these days.
There's more voice clips than just the Freemasons. Remember that?
Yeah, yeah, and yeah, the alien thing. I mean, as a child, I mean, I was seeing, you know, ghosts and, you know, and that, and I also had experience, you know, repetitive dreams where I felt like I was being abducted. So I mean, I don't know what that is. I don't know what that's all about. Whether it's interdimensional stuff or just, you know, a figment of my imagination.
No, I think it's these constructs. I used to think you built them yourself in your mind, but I'm starting to believe they actually exist in a different parallel universe, whatever. Because like this repetitive place I've been going to since I was a child, and I'm nearly 50. This can't be an accident.
Wow. And real quick, guys, the image that Jaron shared, I took it into Photoshop and I just corrected the color a little bit. And one thing I noticed right off the bat is, okay, it appears there might be a little bit of a lens flare in front of his mouth. However, when you compare, with this actually looks like you know, light sort of reflecting off of a glass portal. This right here, hi mom, like there's nothing in between them, and I think you've got a similar sort of lens flare effect with an open hatch. So I believe that, you know, this guy is, you know, this should be closed and there's no window here, but based on this, you'd see a similar sort of reflection here. So I just thought I'd point that out. There is zero reflection, such as that little happy little astronaut. So
Oh, that's so bad. Is John's mic, does that keep getting muted?
Oh, maybe it's when I move the cursor around. Anyway, can you hear me good?
Yeah.
Anyway, I'll try to, let me, whoops.
If you look at that picture again, John, the shadow that's coming off the little room that he's in or whatever, and then the shadow coming off that concrete funnel, they're completely opposite.
On what? Well, I heard the first part, but oh, you mean here?
Yeah.
Oh, you're presenting it? I don't see it. Okay. Well, scroll down a little bit so you can see that little funnel part you were talking about.
Oh.
Okay, so see the shadow coming off that funnel?
Right.
But the shadow coming off into the room he's in would say that the sun is to the upper left.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, and I believe they're always, whenever we see the ISS, they've always got, if it's a real thing, they've got local, very, very bright lights on it. And you can tell because there'll be times when you'll see the sunrise, like, way back here off in the distance, and then the thing will light up bright as hell on this end of it. It's like, how does that work? So yeah, they're definitely using floodlights. I think they do some of the stuff underwater, like for spacewalks, but with today's technology, it's just floodlights on a STET, you know, not that difficult to achieve when you've got the kind of budget they've got. $20 billion this year. Yep, $20 billion. So, okay, so UFOs, for one thing, like when you look at stuff like the Foo Fighters that were experienced by both apparently, if you believe the stories of the pilots, there were these like bright orbs back during World War II that would follow along with the different planes, and the Americans thought it was German technology, the Germans thought it was American technology, and the Russians thought it was one or the other, but they all noticed these sort of orbs. They called them Foo Fighters, because I believe there was some sort of, I don't know, rumors of them bringing good luck when they flew with you, sort of like dolphins or whatever. But so you've got things like that. Then you've got things like the Phoenix Lights, which happened, I think, in the 1990s, where obviously in Phoenix, I think it was something like 10,000 people witnessed a giant, basically triangular shaped, what they described as a craft, totally silently, probably, I think they said 3 miles across, it was huge, silently passed directly over Phoenix for a period of, I don't know, 30 minutes or so. There's very sparse footage of it. You just see some lights in the sky, but tens of thousands of people saw it. And you know, I'm just throwing out information here. Then you've also got like ancient paintings of what appear to be UFOs, and even like Da Vinci paintings with UFOs, and it appears as there may have been an actual UFO phenomenon throughout history. Now, I don't want to get too off into the deep end into something like the Mandela effect. You know, maybe they went back in time and painted the UFOs in there. I don't think that's the case. I think that this is an actual phenomenon. I personally have seen unidentified flying objects. You know, I'm not going to say it was an alien spacecraft, but if you think about this Earth, instead of Well, first of all, let's think about it in the heliocentric model. If they are aliens coming from another planet, they're obviously not coming from our solar system, so they must be coming from somewhere within our galaxy, which means it would take them millions of years to get here. So first of all, they'd have to find us, and that would be like getting a signal from one of our broadcasts from 1945, because that's how many years it took them to get that broadcast. Then it's going to take them 1,000 years to get here. So I just don't see that being plausible in the heliocentric model. I just don't think it's possible. If the heliocentric model is true, I don't think it's possible to travel from galaxy to galaxy. Even if you fold space-time and all that crap, I think it's nonsense. Now, since I know for a fact that the heliocentric model is wrong, I mean, we've kicked its ass all day for the last 2.5 hours, and that's been my mission for the last 9 months. So if it is an infinite plane, notice I have the caveat if, there could be other geothermal pockets nearby. And in fact, Jaron, you had sent me that 1902 Iron Republic Florida Magazine article, and actually a Facebook friend of mine, John Cooper, had sent it to me a few months ago, and I'm halfway through putting it in audiobook format, so I haven't read the whole thing. But basically, it's a 1902 serial, article. It's written as if it's a real account. It kind of seems like fiction at times, but apparently these guys did a solar expedition, went through beyond the South Pole, and popped out where they were going to be, here in Earth, coming up towards the Americas. But it turned out they went through the Antarctic and wound up in a whole other world with the different continents and different people that had actually been an offshoot from the migration of immigrants from the European countries over to America. So that's sort of the premise of this whole 1902 Iron Republic Florida Magazine thing, which I am about finished putting into audiobook format. So that's going to be really exciting. But the whole point of that is if you consider that possibly, there is no dome, there is no enclosure, the only boundary to our world is just the southernmost path of the sun, that's the Tropic of Capricorn. That's just an imaginary line. So, this thing could end and fall off at an edge, or it could stretch out to infinity, or it could be anything in between those two options. And so if you've got other geothermal pockets, we'll call them other worlds nearby, I think it's entirely possible for advanced civilizations to leap or traverse from their world nearby to our world nearby. Now, the reason why it even gets more interesting is because people who claim to have had, close encounters of the first kind, right, where you're actually abducted, they claim that these beings have, 2 arms, 2 legs, a head with 2 eyes, and they basically are humanoid. And so, and just theorizing here, if this is true, if what they're reporting is true, and there are little green men and little gray men traveling here in craft, to me, it proves that they're from somewhere close by, because biologically they're similar to us. Biologically, we would have more in common with an ant or even, a vegetable than we would with an alien from another galaxy or even an alien from another solar system. And so the quote fact that these aliens have 2 arms, 2 legs, 2 eyes, and basically look humanoid is pretty good circumstantial evidence that they're not coming from very far away. So basically my theory is that there is a UFO phenomenon. They're not coming from other planets, and possibly they have wrecked their craft, or we've shot their craft down, like in New Mexico. What was it, Roswell, back in the 40s. So I think this is all possible. Now, I also think that it gives a big motive for the military to cover it up and poo-poo it, because if they were to admit, yeah, we're in contact with alien species, well, the first question is going to be, well, where are they coming from? Well, then the jig is up. I mean, they're going to have to, they're going to have to level with us. So
I think
to
the
me,
crazy thing about the Iron Republic, real quick, just about that story, is it was from a 1902 magazine, which, I'll admit a lot of things can be faked, but there's people who have that actual magazine printed in 1902. So it's not like it was written in 1950 and then thrown inside of a 1902 magazine. It was written in 1902, and the writing is very progressive as far as the guys who find what turned out to be the Iron Republic was it's basically some people discovered it in like 1650 and created their own society there, and they were about 100 years ahead of us as far as technologically advanced, and the guy is writing about things that would have been crazy to talk about in 1902, like everybody having a radio and TV, and these things weren't even understood in 1902. They weren't even looked forward to. So that's why I think it's a great story. I do think that once the story starts being told from the guy being there, I think it sounds a little bit fake. But the beginning of it certainly sounds legit, and I just think that that's one thing that I really liked about it and that really stuck out. And then also, I think the way he explained the reason why no one has ever shown themselves from there rang true to me. That if there was and they said they were about the same distance as the United States is away from Antarctica, they're the same distance on the other side of Antarctica. And when he asked, well, why did you never come back? Why did you never come see? And they said, well, we hate to sound selfish, but what is the point? Well, if we have technology that is ahead of yours, what good does it do for us to travel to you? All you would do is want to come and wreck what we've built here, and we can't get anything that you have because you're behind us. So, I mean, it made sense to me that I could see people doing that. Why would they want to travel back to the United States when they knew that we're still a warring people, that we still have a class system? He talked about how they over there didn't have a class system, that if you went to like a theater event, whether you were the richest or the poorest, everybody got a ticket for the same price, and then they drew your seat number. So when you went to a sporting event or whatever, you would sit wherever you drew your number. It's completely random, which I thought was brilliant. I mean, it's something that they would never do in the United States, but if there was a group of people that got together. So I thought the article was really good. So I'm looking forward to you reading it, John.
Yeah, and I haven't finished reading it either. I've read, bits and pieces of it, and I've recorded about half of it. So I'm a little over halfway done with it. It won't take me long to finish it, but it's so interesting. And just like you said, because of the fact that it was written in 1902, yeah, they start talking about technologies that weren't even on the table then. And I think it's really interesting that I forget the captain's name, but this guy is, besides Admiral Byrd, the only person that I know of that's traversed south beyond the South Pole. And so, basically when Byrd returned, he was talking about warm weather and a landmass larger than the size of the Americas, south of the South Pole. So it really does make a lot of sense to me that, if we're not the only world here and there are other worlds nearby, and they understand what's going on in reality, they don't think they live on some ball and their brightest minds are trying to figure out how we live stuck to the side of a spinning spheres flying through outer space. Instead, their brightest minds are focused on real practical things that are going to make practical use of it.
You know what else is interesting there, and this is just something my mind starts wandering, but the guy describes he went down to Mount Vesuvius, right? They climbed that mountain, him and a bunch of guys from the boat, and then they looked behind them to what he said should be the south, expecting to see all of Antarctica. And they saw what looked like within 20 miles another body of water, and that's when he got confused as to how can this, he was all backed up, all confused. How can this be that there's water behind me? This should be a huge, continent. So then they go down and they start riding their boat along the wall, and that's when they found this crevice that had opened. Basically, because an iceberg fell, they saw this little channel. They took the channel and only went 25 miles and were on the other side. So then they said when they were going to come back that was closed off. Basically, the ice had redone. So what I started thinking is, imagine if that happens every, say, 200, 300 years, even every 100 years. Well, the powers that be would know that, let's say it does heat up the Earth right now, global warming. Let's not say it's not going to be bad for humans. It wouldn't even raise the ocean levels. But it is a periodic heating. Well, if that heating melts a few icebergs, and a few icebergs open up this channel, then what's happening is they need to make sure that they do whatever they can, even if it's with chemspraying or whatever. They're trying to make sure that the icebergs don't ever heat enough that they melt and open that channel, because once that channel opens, it's over for them. That's all they have left would be the ice wall. They need that. They need to call that a continent, and if anybody ever saw, hey, there's a way through here, and they went through that and saw the other side, well, it'd be all over for them. So it might be one of the reasons they're so big on global warming.
Well, that and covering up UFOs too. Again, I mean, it really makes a lot of sense if you just sort of go with the hypothesis. I mean, you don't have to, or one doesn't have to subscribe to an idea to think through something and hypothesize. And to me, it makes perfect sense that if Byrd did discover that there was another world or another solar system or whatever you want to call it nearby. And by the way, you've also got this UFO phenomenon occurring. I see a huge motive for them to cover it up because they want us under control right here in this ring. And as soon as we find out that there's more to explore, I mean, really, that's what makes being a human. That's really the meaning of life, is exploration. I think it's hardwired into our DNA to want to find out what's beyond the next hill. Manifest destiny from sea to shining sea. And so to take that away from us, I would say brilliantly, but I guess you could say nefariously, by basically wrapping the edges of our imagination at the bottom of a sphere, is very clever, because instead of us being sort of pioneering and curious and explorative outwards, which is doable, they got us theorizing about going up into the sky to go visit the little lights in the sky, which is just complete and utter folly. And so I could totally see a split-off civilization gaining vast, huge leaps in technology over us, because they're dedicating their best minds to practical uses instead of this just logically repulsive heliocentric line of thinking that we have going on here.
And I also think, I just want to say this to everybody who's on the call and everybody listening, that we need to get back, and maybe it's more me who's saying this to myself, but we need to get back to being okay with making mistakes, because I think it's something that we got away from when everyone started to get on this whole, you can't talk about something, you can't say something unless it's the truth. And your two friends over there at the last place you had calls, John, on that one show where they were calling out all the shills, they flat out said, you are not allowed to speak about something unless it's fact. And I mean, that's ridiculous. I mean, it's just not the way that you can ever learn and grow. There's nothing wrong with saying anything. If you think, well, the way you see it is this, say it. If it's the way that your eyes see it, maybe other people feel the same way. Maybe other people see it the same way, and maybe it will trigger something in somebody else's mind to say, I never thought of that, but it works well with my idea of this. And I think that's the best way that we can learn and go forward. And nobody's dumb enough to say something that doesn't work to anybody else and them all say, oh, well, let's just all adopt this as truth now because so-and-so said it. That's not the way you should ever take any information. But I love to hear everything. There's nothing I don't want to hear, and give me what your idea is and why you think it, and then we move on from there. And I see if it fits mine. If not, I push it aside. But I think that everybody kind of saying, well, we have to make sure we don't speak about things unless they're 100% true, it's going to be hard for us to get anywhere very fast.
Yeah, and not only that, Jaron, I mean, facts are kind of subjective sometimes. A lot of people state a lot of things as facts, including our mainstream science, model, which we know a lot of that is just complete BS. So, when somebody says, well, this is a fact, that can be entirely subjective. Who says, right? So you're right. I think that all kinds of ideas should be entertained, and I agree with that 100%.
But it's having people qualify if they're throwing out a hypothetical versus some people. I'm not saying anyone here or anything, it's just some people talk their hypotheticals as that's the truth until proven otherwise, and then you get the people who aren't critical thinkers and they hear that, they think, well, so-and-so said it, so I'm going to run with it, and then that's what propagates is, like you're saying, with subjective truth, it's subjective opinion, and that's where if you can say anything you want, but qualify what you're saying as being, being hypothetical or under consideration, and not speak of it as if it were absolute.
Well,
I think a lot of people are getting too absolute with their hypotheses.
Yeah, it is. It is a big problem, because, and you'll see it manifest in such ways to where, like, literally, you'll have a flat earther tell you off because you tell them there might not be a glass dome in the sky. So yeah, I totally get what you're saying. But Jaron, you got a point too. I mean, let's admit it. The whole purpose of the scientific method is to test theories, to test hypotheses. And you're right, Brian. We have to say, okay, let's just say hypothetically, if this is the case, then we can do some sort of experimentation or whatever to either prove it or falsify it or, you know, modify our model. And so that's how progress is made. Progress isn't made by only stating things that are known facts, when in fact, like Bob said, many times known facts are completely the opposite of the truth. So yeah.
People say it's a known fact that the moon goes in front of the sun for eclipses. I'm sorry, for new moons, or it's on the same side as the sun, and that's why we don't see it during new moon. And I remember early on I brought up one time that, to me, if that moon is coming around and it's new moon time, there's no way it would just not be seen in the sky. And when I said that, I got a ton of shit about it's already a known fact of why there's a new moon. End of story. Don't talk about that anymore. And I still think every day that no, that is absolutely wrong. What we are given as a new moon is bullshit. And I'll say it every day because when I did say it, other people were emailing me saying, I think the same thing. There's no way that you would not see any of the moon at a new moon. It's impossible. You would see the top of it being lit up, or the side of it, or the outline of it. It just doesn't make sense to me that it gets washed out. And me saying that, I don't care if somebody says, well, it's a fact that this is why it happens. Well, I don't believe in that fact. So I'm going to keep saying things like that until someone shows me or proves to me. I mean, do you know somebody can't even take a picture of the new moon? That you would think that you would be able to change the filter on your camera to get at least the outline of it. Nobody's ever done it.
Doesn't it at least blot out the background stars?
The what?
Yeah, I think there's a gray silhouette.
Yeah, well, like, no, if there's a no moon, so there's, you can't see any lit up moon, and I'm asking because I don't know. It just occurred to me. I'd never thought about this, but doesn't it blot out the stars that should be behind it, or?
No, it's over by the sun, so there's no stars. The sun is what's causing the new moon. So you can't see it at night because it's on the side of this Earth where the sun is.
Right. Well, that goes right into what I was saying before with the Morgile effect, that for that half of the month, the moon should only be visible during the daytime, and at the very new moon phase would be the peak or the very middle of that cycle where the moon is only visible during the day. And so I guess that makes sense because you can't see the dark side of the moon during the day. So that does make some sense, but on the other hand, we see the sun. I mean, we see the moon all different times of the month, not just 15 days in a row or whatever, or 14 and a half days in a row where it's only visible during the day. So, I mean, I see what you're saying, but either way, the heliocentric model doesn't match reality.
It doesn't. I mean, if you just think, I know it sounds like it makes sense that it's over there during the day and we shouldn't be able to see it, but it really doesn't. If you think of the way light works, if it's going to go around the moon to the point where we don't see the moon at all, then you should be able to get a camera with a heat filter, with a thermal camera. You should be able. If you look it up, there's a record for the earliest somebody's ever seen the moon, and it's like a day and a half after the new moon. That's the record for anybody even getting a photograph of any sign of it. So I mean, that's just crazy to me that we would just accept that and say, no, that's just the way it goes. We don't see it. It doesn't exist in the sky. No, there's something going on there. If it was an actual terraformed item, huge rock going through the sky, the sun would not flush it out of the sky. It just wouldn't happen, and especially if you're talking about it being above or below the sun from our perspective. How could something be above the sun from our perspective and the light doesn't hit underneath it? That's bullshit. Just saying.
Yeah, I do see what you're saying.
Yep.
Yeah, it's still a pretty big mystery in terms of the phases of the moon to me, but I see good evidence that the phases of the moon are just a relationship between the sun reflecting light and our relative observation point of that, and that also does line up with eclipses. But then again, I've seen evidence to support the idea that the moon is not, the phases of the moon are not caused by the reflection of the sunlight. So again, to me, it's still sort of a mystery. But hell, that's what science is about, is to look into these things. And the only way we're ever going to solve it, well, we may never solve it, but the only way we're going to come close is to test different theories and test different hypotheses.
Yep. Exactly, John, and that's why I tend to be using the term demonstrable more these days instead of as a fact. And in line with that, have you guys ever taken a fluorescent light bulb and put it near a one of those plasma balls and watched it illuminate? I'm sure everybody's probably done that. You can take any standard fluorescent light bulb, put it next to a plasma ball, and it will illuminate. So my idea, again, in line with my magnetic model, which I'm always harping about, is that the moon phases are actually caused as there is this fluorescing type element, and there are crystals, believe it or not, that actually will fluoresce like this. And so what I'm thinking is, as the moon is passing around, as it's making its circuit, so to speak, that it is passing through these different areas of flux density and flux lines, and this is precisely what is causing the actual phases as it passes through it. Again, that's just my theory, but that's kind of how I'm envisioning this whole thing. So, but now Cammie's the opposite of that, though. She thinks it's more in line with geometric angles and stuff like that. So, a lot of ideas.
What do you think about the wandering stars that have phases that are very similar to the moon's? Same thing?
I think, I would say that that's very much the same thing, just like I think that meteorites are, again, when I talked about when I observed them, not only do they light up extremely bright, but they have a very electrical sound to them if you listen to them when they become audible. So again, the whole thing is an electric construct, and that's the phases, I believe, are actually passing through these curved electromagnetic flux lines, very much so. And I think that ultimately it's going to be proved out to be that way.
Yeah, I totally agree. I really do. It seems like, and I agree more and more with Tesla every day, that when you understand frequency and when you understand vibration and electromagnetism, that's essentially the key to basically everything. And I think that something like the grand unified theory is still very, very possible in a flat stationary Earth model, where you've got the electromagnetic spectrum, and then you've got the audible spectrum, but it's all just different frequencies and different waves. Even density levels can be sort of considered as different frequencies or different wave patterns. And so I'm totally in agreement with you. And so to me, that's why it's all the more preposterous for us as a species to be making movies like Star Wars and then having our brightest minds and most dedicated scientists seriously thinking that we're going to send people to that little dot in the sky. I think it's a shame, because we could be a lot further along than this. But again, I think that our really the whole way that America especially is set up anymore is they really don't want progress. They want things to more or less stay the same, and they, being the ones in power, want to make sure that we have to stay busy. We have to stay, with our nose to the grind, and not really have time to sit down and think about things like, we're sitting around talking about. So good for us.
Yep, exactly. Yeah, one other thing too, John, that I wanted to kind of touch on, back to the UFO thing, and that is that, yes, I agree that if when you go back to the ancient, or the earlier days, like you said, that magazine article was like 1902. And by the way, what magazine was that?
Yeah, it's the Florida Magazine.
Florida Magazine. Okay,
yep.
There you go, Morpheus. That was your question. So all right. So now that would seem to preclude any of our technology, when you look at stuff like that. And it could be very much that, there are several, we are on like somewhat of an infinite plane, and there are lots of little circles in the ice, if you will, with their own suns and their own civilizations and stuff like that. And that may be, other circular areas of the plane where the people that are inhabiting that are actually kind of traversing over the Antarctic line and are kind of observing this reality. And I've said many times that philosophically I believe that we are creating our own reality here, and we come down into this reality and we play our own games when we incarnate. And I think that and again, I'm saying this very philosophically, but when you have all these different planes and all these different existences on the plane, we can choose to incarnate into these, in physical form, into these different civilizations and different possibilities of life, where we might incarnate on a different plane where they're not under the impression that we're on a spinning ball hurtling through space, or they may have some other type of deception going on to see sociologically how the group mind reacts to it and stuff like that. So again, I've always said that I believe that God is within all of us, and in order for God to simply, continue to exist, you can't go stagnant, and so you have to create all these new possibilities. And when you incarnate, your mind, your memories are essentially wiped from knowing who and what you are, and so you get to play a whole new game every single time. Everything is anew. You're born into it, and that's kind of how you propagate yourself when you are omnipotent and go on forever. It just seems to make a lot of sense to me. So, it could be just our other selves from other realms that are visiting us here. So
that's an interesting thought. Yeah. Matrix, you hadn't had too much talk time, buddy. So, is there anything that you wanted to go over while we got a couple minutes left?
Sure. I mean, perhaps we are living inside the mind of the creator. I mean, that's one possibility. Yeah, I mean, there's lots of points you guys have been chatting about. I mean, I don't think the phases of the moon match up with what we are told. When I'm witnessing the sun setting on the western horizon and the moon rising in the east, and it's not a full moon, and the part of the moon that is not illuminated doesn't seem to match up either. I think we should get more solar eclipses with the globe model than we do. There's actually a solar eclipse happening on this Tuesday, around the equator from Thailand to Guam and then into the Pacific Ocean, so people should check that out. I think speculation is a good thing. I think it leads to creative thought and new ideas and ways of thinking, and I think it's absolutely essential. And we can talk about facts, and I think that's important too, but I think speculation is extremely important. Getting to the alien thing, I think maybe these aliens look like us, or they look like these politicians and the royalty who don't look like us.
Yeah, they do.
Also, the UFO design of these craft is kind of improved over the decades from like this flying saucer to these to these fancy triangular things, and they also say directed energy might be related to these crop circles that we see happening around different places. Yeah, some of them are faked, but others have been kind of filmed, and you have these orbs and stuff, and that kind of ties into possibly 9/11. People say they saw some orbs on 9/11, and so I'm just bringing it up. And there's lots of UFO activity reported in the USA and the UK. Which is interesting. So yeah, I've got some more things to say, but yeah, that's it for now.
Well, and I think it's an important point because, and I hate to sound like a flat Earth salesman, right? Because I really don't want to convince anybody of something, but I do want people to know the truth. And one of the big issues that I had with it was, again, I've been sort of a UFO buff my whole life. I mean, I remember ever since I was very small just being fascinated by the prospect. And I literally, I remember when I was maybe 8 or 9 going down to the library and finding the 1 or 2 books they had on UFOs back in the, early 1990s. Well, that's all changed very much. But I think it's important to leave the possibility open. and I know people are gonna, shoot me for this, but I'm not for a fake alien invasion or anything. But I mean, the truth is the truth is the truth. And if it is true that there are other worlds, and if it is true that there are beings visiting us, then then that's the truth. Now, am I saying that's the truth? No, I'm saying it's possible, and in fact, the observations of people that are reporting these things align far more nicely with the flat Earth model than they do with the heliocentric model, and for just an infinite number of reasons. So that's just my 2 cents on that. But like, I got a buddy of mine I've known for many years. We worked together for years. His code name, or his avatar name, is always Obi-Wan. So he's definitely a Star Wars fan, and he just absolutely will not talk to me about this issue. I guess he likes aliens and Star Wars, and the thought of infinite space is so intriguing and fantastic, and he just won't. He just told me don't bring it up anymore. He doesn't want to talk about it, and so there's some people that are just not ready for this. But I think if we leave the possibility, because it is a possibility, if we leave the possibility for these UFOs to actually be a real phenomenon, that we might be able to get some more people to look at this. Now, of course, I also believe that a lot of the UFO phenomenon is government either back engineering these things and just taking joyrides, or the government could have invented the whole thing in the 40s like we think. There's a lot of different ways it could go, but I think it's important to leave all possibilities open until we've completely eliminated each possibility.
Yep, well said.
Yeah, interesting.
Yep.
So
yeah, John, there is one thing that, if we have a few minutes, I would like to kind of throw out in front of the panel here, because I've been cogitating all week. Would you care to share my screen?
Yeah, absolutely. Give me one second. Right. There you go.
All right, very cool. All right, so here's the deal. This is what I've been curious about. I posted a video this week, a mirror from a guy that did a video on the Tim Peake CGI fakery, as you can see. And of course, I put a little disclaimer on here because we're going to be talking about this tomorrow as well. But I thought I'd get the thoughts of the panel here. Now, a lot of people have said that, well, this is complete nonsense, because this blue screen that's being used behind here, back here, all right, see, we're looking at this, is one that they use for educational training, and they do it for a lot of videos. And so I looked at that, and of course lots of people sent links, and once I looked at that, I agree with that. That definitely appears to be something that they do use as a backdrop. You can see it on several other videos, but also there are some companies out there that use a blue and white, or kind of a light blue checkered backdrop for CGI. Okay, now the companies that I saw did not have a perfectly linear pattern like this, where it's perfect squares. It actually has like kind of enclosed or indented, and they get further apart as they go towards the screen, and all this is for calibration. Okay, so I will concede for the moment that what we're seeing here is very commonly used, but so let me pop up a little bit further here. So back here we have Tim Peake in the background, and he's showing it. Now, here's the problem that I'm having right here. I will concede that this is definitely a backdrop. However, when you look at this area behind here, and we're going to zoom in on that, we're going to go ahead and get a little bit closer, and that comes in at 1 minute and 5 seconds. Okay, all right. Now, what we're seeing here is we're looking at a perspective that is not seen on the ISS. And this perspective right here, first of all, would put the camera up pretty high, because look, it's looking down at Tim Peake, okay? And when you look at all the other ISS videos with this particular backdrop, the ceiling is like right here, right across, just barely above it, and it's hanging down literally from the ceiling, and there's nothing else. There's no other space. Now, when we look at this particular diagram, what I'm seeing back here, and I don't know how well you guys can see this, but I'm seeing, like back here, here's a monitor hanging down from the ceiling. We have other monitors back here. We have a monitor here, a back of a monitor. We have another monitor over here. We've got what appears to be a lot of area way back, going far, far, far back. Okay, so I'm looking at that and I'm going, okay, great. So this may be something they're using in the ISS, but this is not the ISS. And so I've caught a lot of flack on this, and I actually had to put this disclaimer up on it because I wanted to get other people's opinions. Do you guys think, and this is the question, do you think that it's even possible that this was on the ISS considering what we're seeing here? And that's my question.
Is it supposed to be? I kind of lost. You jumped right in. Is that guy supposed to be on the ISS?
Yes, that's Tim Peake, and he's been on the ISS since the beginning of the year. This particular video came from the George Bush Sr. and Gabby Gifford's visit, which was just like 3 weeks ago, right? And so as he walks in, and you see this, so as he walks in, this is how it starts out. I'll go ahead and let it run here for just a second. All right, just a quick clip, bam, he's being wheeled in, and back here on the back screen, you see this happen, okay? And so I'm going to stop it right here, all right? And so we see the full screen, and again, you can see a lot of depth going way, 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 way back there.
Yeah.
And
but
so
my question is that guy supposed to be on the ISS?
Yes, he is.
Oh, okay. Well.
Absolutely, he is. And that is absolutely Tim Peake. There's no doubt about it.
Well, you answered your question.
I agree, Bob. I agree. I think it's a much bigger space back there, and I don't think the ISS has that kind of space. I noticed that too. I agree. I think it looks like a warehouse, some kind of thing.
Well, there's this too. I think that they do a lot of their zero-G shots in like the vomit comet, like in a parabolic sort of trajectory plane, but something on a much larger scale. And anybody that's ever lived near a military base has seen the big B-2 bomber planes go overhead. They're like basically flying fortresses. I mean, these things are huge. And I wouldn't be surprised to find 50 years from now that the military has things that put those to shame. So my point is they've got the money, they've got the means to send these guys up with all this equipment into these very large, parabolic trajectories to where they basically lose their gravity for up to, if they can do it for a minute here in civilian terms, then I see no reason why they couldn't do it for 10 or 20 or 30 minutes in a much larger vehicle that's doing a much larger arc.
Yeah, they definitely have much bigger planes. I mean, on my ISS hoax video at the end, there's some photographs of some really huge planes. I mean, they look like the triple story, really wide, with NASA written on the side of them. I mean, they're massive. Really.
Yeah, don't limit your the vomit comet to be the size of where they can, float around in. So
right, and so right here you're looking at a blue screen that is behind a guy, and you can see the lines are not equally spaced, either vertically or horizontally, and that's for camera calibration. Now that doesn't mean that blue screen that's behind him couldn't possibly use for it. I don't know. I'm not an expert on that. But when enough people came forward and said, oh yeah, look at all these other videos where they're presenting in front of the screen, that's the first thing that immediately caught my attention, is like, oh yeah, but it's hanging immediately from the top of the ISS, what's supposed to be the ISS. So I don't think this is in an airplane or anything, but it's more
an
warehouse.
Yeah, it does look very linear. Like I see what you're saying, and yeah, they could easily be shooting something like this in an office. But at the same time, though, really, it could be a very large bomber plane that is outfitted to look like the ISS from specific angles. I just don't think that specific angle is anything that they necessarily wanted us to see, because you're right. You can see that that's what they want you to see right there. But when you get up above it, they've got like 6 computer monitors, almost as if they're doing a live, production, right? So now, has that particular backdrop, that checkered backdrop, been seen on the ISS before, in mundane use, or is that?
Yes.
It
Yeah, I
has.
just do a side by side with that image, and then get another clip of when he's doing his presentation in front of that, and just link, do a side by side comparison. Believe me, I know I'm an outsider to everyone and everything else, but the two big things is, I think some people have their heads so far into and I say this respectfully, don't get me wrong, is that you're looking at this to such a minutia and such a detail that the obvious is, yeah, that guy is not on the ISS. And kind of the other thing, throwing back to the conversation a second ago, in support of what Jeranism or Jeran was saying, is that the dialogue starts going back and forth between blowing apart what the fakery is going on, and tearing apart the helio, and then all of a sudden the conversation shifts to what's actually going on. And again, from an outside, it's hard to follow what people are really talking about if they're destroying the model that's being shoved down everyone's throat, or if they're trying to present what they believe is going on. And again, from an outsider standpoint, it's kind of hard to follow if you're tearing down or building up what's going on. So I think in this case that the guy is definitely not where he says he is. But.
Well, another funny thing to mention is, and I wish one day we can get GeoShifter on here, because he's agreed to be a panel member from time to time. I don't think we've had him on the show yet. So he did a great video showing, it was early footage of the ISS when it was very, very new. And what it seemed like, or what they showed, is a very spacious ISS with room for these for 3 men to do backflips around each other, and they were taking showers. And what's happened is, over the last, I think this was in the 80s or the 90s, over the last 20 or 30 years, the ISS has gotten, well, less and less comfortable, tighter, smaller spaces, and it doesn't make any sense. But I don't know the link to the video from GeoShifter, but it was really, really well done, because he finds some really great old NASA footage of the ISS that shows it's almost like their situation is getting worse and worse. They don't take showers anymore. They just do little sponge baths. But they did have working showers in the 1980s on the ISS.
Yeah, that was the Mir space station. Yeah, that was the Mir space station back then. I don't think the ISS was built until around the year 2000, maybe a little bit before then.
Didn't they just add on to it though?
No, they started building around that time, and they built it piece by piece, section by section, over the last 15, 16 years, I think it is.
Right. So isn't it funny though that they can get something up there in the 80s that's like really comfortable, and they can flip around each other, and they've got showers, and now with all this technology later, they're back to basically the Stone Age compared to the 80s. It's ridiculous.
Right, and also Skylab had that shower in it, kind of the old bathtub with the curtain around it type of. Skylab had that in it also. And so look at this, guys. So he's grabbing onto the bar, which is just above, which is one of these blue bars back here. Now, if you look at the other space videos where they actually have that blue screen hanging down, it's actually hanging from one of these bars. So these bars are mounted directly to the ceiling. So this would be what they're purporting to be inside the ISS. But when you go to this shot, wow, look at all that room. And the camera is clearly pointing at a steep angle down. And look at the distance between his head. I mean, there's got to be another at least 5 feet there.
It's funny, but if I'm not mistaken, in order to do like a live 3D realistic sort of sequence like that, you have to have multiple angles shot simultaneously, and that basically that that data is put into a computer with all those little lines, or sometimes they'll use little balls as reference points for the computers, and it takes a good computer just a couple seconds to render all that together into a live stream where you could there may not be a tennis ball there at all, but that's why you've got this high looking down on an angle, is so that they can get the full 3D sort of perspective of the trick. That's that's the only reason I can think of why they would have a camera at that angle and even be concerned with it, because if I'm understanding the way that they do 3D live renderings correctly, you sort of need to have an X, Y, and Z looking at the same point.
You're exactly right, Morgile. And not only that, that's what I was showing on the other grid, where they had the grids that were just slightly different in length. Because what they have is they have a camera up to the right and a camera up to the left right here. Okay, and then these cameras up here actually render out what is really in the background and allows them to calibrate the CGI image into the background. And you know, just to kind of address a point that Red's Rhetoric had in a debate with Jaron, Red's Rhetoric was saying, can you render CGI in full time? And Red believes the answer is no, but Red, you're wrong. The answer is yes, you can, and it's demonstrable in the public domain. There's technology out there right now that will render CGI in real time.
Avid, Avid system.
Absolutely, yeah.
Yes.
There is the Avid system that does that. Since 9/11, that technology was available. And that's how they apparently fake the planes live.
Now, sorry to interrupt, but it may take them months ahead of time to model out all of these little things and create all the necessary, animations. But yeah, no, you can definitely render something like that in real time. Yeah, and always there's a 30 or 40-second delay on live TV. But yeah, in terms of the planes. Yeah, I've seen the footage, and for the longest time I was convinced that planes hit. Now I'm questioning that. I think that there may have been a drone plane involved, or maybe there was no plane and that was just added in later. So,
all those footages came out a day later. There was no footage on the actual day of, if you're talking about 9/11. All those were submitted the following day.
Apparently there were 3 live broadcasts of the plane.
Well, the Fox News one coming in from, was it the South? You're talking about those live feeds, or the ones from the so-called private citizens?
No, the live feeds. Not the ones from the private citizens.
Right.
They came later.
I thought you were talking about the from the private people, or the private alleged citizens. All those were submitted the following day.
Yeah, I mean, people should know. I just re-uploaded my 9/11 directed energy and no planes video, and in that video, it goes into the live broadcast and how the footage was faked, and the supposed footage that came along later, the Hezekiah footage, and which is known as ghost plane, how the plane melts into the building. And according to Newton's third law, it seems to be a valid law, law of opposing forces. There's no way that's possible. An aluminium plane can penetrate a steel and reinforced concrete building across several floors the way that it did. It would have just broken up mostly upon impact.
Are you the guy that did the nose in, nose out video?
No.
No, that was Simon Shack.
Yeah, but that is mentioned in my video.
Okay. Yep. So anyway, I just wanted to get this out there. Now I have made it not private, but the one where you can only go to it if you have the link. I did that in the interest of I wanted to get several people's opinion on this as to whether or not I should leave it up, because again, I don't want to leave anything up that would appear to be disinformation. And granted, although I have conceded for Big Truck 008, who is the guy that originally made this, that yes, this screen is used, I think the more damning point and the more valid point is this perspective. Now, I will also say that there are 2 particular YouTubers out there that have done quote-unquote debunking videos of this one and David Weiss's as well. One guy is named called Dazza the Cameraman, and the other one is called Run to God.
Run to Christ, I think it is.
Run to Christ, that's it. Yeah, Run to Christ. And so Run to Christ is being extremely deceptive, because what he does in his video is he actually crops this so that it's just above here and says, yeah, there's some people making an argument that the perspective is there, and he cuts it off right here, like an inch above, and says, as you can see, that's just simply not true. And I'm just going, my God. So
yeah, the disinformation out going around, guys, is really getting thick, and I expect that 2016 it's going to get worse, and so I think that's why we should really double down in terms of our solidity as a as a movement, because we all have our own theories. I mean, I'm sure that we all agree on many things, but certainly that we're all going to have our own nuances, because there's a lot of stuff that's still up in the air and a little fuzzy at the edges, but at the same time, that's part of science, that's part of life, that's what makes us individuals, and so we need to just be real careful about hearsay and rumors, and don't judge people based on what people tell you, because I've heard bad things about all sorts of people, and then you get to actually meet the person and you become like best friends, and so that's actually happened a few times, and so just to people out there, since they can't really attack our data and the whole willfully ignorant thing isn't working much anymore, they are going to start with the personal attacks, and so just as long as we're on prepared for it and on the guard for it, it shouldn't affect us too adversely.
And every time there's a debunking video, I'd kind of select how you want to spend your time, because if they start throwing balls down the street and you start chasing them, kind of lose focus. Because from the outside, now there's going to be all these waves of debunking videos, and it's like, who cares?
Yeah, I'm done with response videos for the time being. It'll really take a lot for me to do another response, because I just feel I'd much rather be working on things positive. I personally have a lot more fun just kicking the shit out of the globe model, and really I do. I think that's a bit of fun. And also there's some good points that we can prove about the flat Earth model, and that's where that's my zone, that's my comfort zone, and I think that's where I am most effective personally. Everybody has their own methodology, but I certainly don't expect anyone to take what I'm saying as gospel. Do your own research, come to your own conclusions, but you really have to apply the scientific method to all hypotheses in order to be a scientist. Otherwise, you're just a dogmatic religious zealot who is indoctrinated in the cult of scientism, which is ultimately a sun-worshipping cult who don't even know it. So, any final thoughts, gentlemen? Did we get, I guess we didn't get Jaren back, but anybody have some final thoughts before we pop off?
Yeah. Well, I'd just like to say that the ISS was, the first component was launched in 1998, according to Wikipedia. I'm just reading from it here. And the first people on it were up there in the year, I think it's 2000, 2nd of November 2000. So they built that quite quickly. And there were apparently, it says that ISS is the 9th space station to be inhabited by crews, following the Soviet and later Russian Salyut, Almaz, Mir, as well as Skylab. So there's been quite a few space stations up there. Apparently.
Yeah, it's ridiculous, because it seems as if they have any capability whatsoever, it would be low Earth orbit, which is very, very similar to high altitude flight, by the way. And it would appear that the Apollo astronauts are just bold-faced liars, and in fact that was proved fairly well. Bart Sibrel, gotta love the guy. I wish he would at least consider the flat Earth model. It seems to me he's still poo-pooing it because he thinks it's stupid, but perhaps he one day will come around. That right hook from old Buzz was a $1 million punch, I'm sure.
Yeah, it made him wobble, didn't it?
Man, I replayed that thing like 6 times in a row in slow motion. Yeah, he felt the pain, but then again, to get knocked the fuck out by an ancient astronaut.
Yeah, man. What an old actor.
Yep.
All right. Well, you guys, it's been a real pleasure hanging out with you. And again, I'm gonna be doing this every Saturday at 3 Eastern, just like we did today. Usually we'll run 3 hours. If we go over, we go over. If I ever show up and it's just me, like I said, I'll be reading from the Principia, starting on page 1. So hopefully at least one person will show up each Saturday. But I've always got something to fall back on, so that's always good. And do you guys? First of all, let me plug my new video again. I've got a new video out. It's y'all definitely check it out. It's nearly 4 hours, so clear your calendars. But it's called The Earth is a Globe on Opposite Day. So I spent a lot of time on it. I think it's pretty good, but I'm biased. But y'all enjoy that, and that's on the Morgile. I'm sorry, that's on my third channel. That's on Jonathan Christopoulos, but I do have it featured on my main channel, the Morgile, and a link to it in a little promo ad I did to it on my main channel. So you'll find it. And if you guys want to plug anything that you're doing, let us know what you got going on in the works.
Well, maybe next week I can give you an update on the where the challenge is at this point. Maybe next week. But we're getting calls from the TV stations now as the second wave of letters are going out to all the schools and the TV departments.
Did you want to explain real quick?
I need 10 minutes, and right now it's now.
Okay. Well, you guys definitely. Everybody out there, check out the Facebook page. It's a Facebook group. It's the $5,000 NASA Challenge. You can find it easy. Just type NASA Eclipse Challenge. Just type in the search box 5,000 NASA Eclipse, and you'll find it. I've got a.
Pass it on to Red's Rhetoric and Jeff C. I've tried to dangle the carrot in front of them, but they're not biting. I'll give them an extra 1,000 if they just talk about it. I need their PR to just blast it, because the more they talk, the more it helps.
The best thing about knowing that you're going to win a bet, I mean, that's always a good thing. I
offered them extra 1,000 if they tackled it.
Well, what I'm saying is though, like usually I like a fair playing field. I still do a fair amount of gaming, but I used to do a lot of online gaming, like old school stuff, going back to Team Fortress Classic. So we're talking way back when online gaming was sort of in its infancy. And then of course you've got like Battlefield 2142 was the love of my life for about 3 years, and you get to the point in those games where you take them very seriously. And you get these buttholes who get what are called hacks for the game, so that they can like shoot you from 3 miles away, and like you shoot them and they don't die. And so like I've always disrespected people that would cheat in any game. It doesn't matter what the game is, whether it's poker or whether it's 2142 or Halo, or whether you cheat at life. I mean, technically, living in a capitalist society, we thrive on cheating people. I hate to say it, but the only way that capitalist society works is if you get a deal and then you kind of shit the next guy down the line. That's how it works. Now,
thanks for the plug, John.
Well, I know I sort of got off on a tangent there, but that's the capitalist society that we live in. But fortunately, if it's a bet that you can win, typically I don't like things being skewed in my favor. I like a fair playing field, but in this particular situation, I'll make an exception because
it's not a skewed playing field. The contest is that the NASA data for eclipse for the sun and the moon at eclipse events.
No, it is a skewed playing field because these freaking guys think they live stuck to the side of a spinning globe.
Oh, I thought you meant because. Never mind.
No, that's what I'm saying. We're not. It's not. It's like we're playing. I don't know. We're playing football, pro football, and they're playing junior peewee baseball or something. We're in two totally different fields, and so that's what I mean. Why I wasn't trying to give you a bad plug. What I was saying was, it is nice to know, it's a bet that you can't lose. Was my ultimate point. But yeah, no worries.
But we understood your Brian.
Pardon?
I said, we understood you, Brian.
Well, no, it's one of the few things that people can be dogmatic about is that all the eclipse data, when you line it up, either from a consistent latitude or any which way, you cannot have a globe, all the sun and moon data for an eclipse event work on a sphere. Those are NASA's numbers and presentation. So they just, if people hides behind, not hides, but uses math, and it's all about math. It's absolutely about the math that there's absolutely no way that the math works out on a globe structure.
Yeah.
So.
And a lot of people come to me asking me, how do I teach this truth to my family, because they think I'm crazy, they won't watch any of the videos, and they think it's stupid. I've literally had friends that were locked up because of this, and I think that the Facebook group, the $5,000 NASA Eclipse Challenge, is a good place to send somebody like that, because not only do they have a chance to win $5,000, but they also have a chance to put this whole debate to rest and prove the world is a globe based on NASA's own data. So I think that's and you better be ready to spend a little time and do a little math and maybe even do a little modeling. Not like on the runway, but like either 3D modeling or even taking a couple of basketballs and a grapefruit. Get it to work.
There's supposedly a TV clip. I could only get the article, but there's a TV clip of a news station in Wyoming that interviewed. I was supposed to do it last week. I didn't get back with them, and they ended up calling a local observatory, and they talked with an astronomer. And again, I haven't seen the clip. I just saw the write-up on it. And he goes, well, it'd be really challenging, but it can be done. Like, okay.
What? So how could something so obviously simple as 3 balls in a line be challenging?
Well, this week, and I don't want to get too ahead of myself, but I've got 3 phones now, and I'm going to have interviews with the astronomer and with a TV news station, and be an engineer trying to defend the globe, and then talk to the guy who's presenting this challenge and have a 3-way conversation with these people and see how that works out. But the best way to approach people is on the protagonist side, meaning I called up the observatory and say, look, we got to beat this guy with his own stupid challenge, and how can we do it so I can get the guy to at least talk to me, and then later kind of divulge what's going on. But the only way people will talk to you is if you unite against an antagonist. So we become the antagonist. And so I called up the observatory and said, look, can we do this challenge? I'll help you. I'll give you all the money. We just have to beat this twerp who's dangling us out here. And that's the only way people are getting back with me. So next week I got a little tape recorder, and I'm just going to tape record the conversations, because half the laws for recording telephones are for third party. You have to have approval.
If you're calling a business, though, and the legalities of it, you might want to check with a lawyer. But I believe if you're calling a business, it's different than if you're calling an individual.
It's 2-part. Most of the laws are for 3-party conversations, meaning I'm going to tape record your conversation with Bob, and you guys don't know about it. I have to tell you that I'm tape recording it. But if I call you, John, and tape record the phone call, about half the states, that's fine.
Understood. I definitely see your tactic, and I wouldn't say that it was. I would say it's like a white lie. I would say it's akin to a white lie, because you're right.
At this point, who cares? They're just not going to talk to you if you come across as a flat earther. So there's a side of me that says, well, let's disprove this. So I don't think I'm being overly deceptive. It's trying to get them to at least converse and find out where they're coming from.
You know,
You
the interesting thing is though is and I know this firsthand, and I know this in a couple of other cases where if you introduce this topic to somebody that has, you know, decent head on their shoulders and has enough knowledge about let's just say conspiracy theories, for lack of a better phrase, but somebody that's smart and knows a little bit about conspiracy theories, there is a chance that they will start thinking about this on their own and get it. Now, as a 1 in a million, a lot of people have to be, you know, really shown every little bit and shown, you know, to the umpteenth decimal point. I mean, I hate to overuse an analogy, but it's like, not only do I have to prove that Santa isn't real, but I also have to disprove Mrs. Claus, all the reindeer, including Rudolph and his nose. It's not good enough that we just you know, show, hey, the world isn't spinning. It's not a sphere. You have to keep on continuing, you know, with, well, what about the Coriolis effect? Well, what about, you know, the stars in the south? And, you know, on and on and on with all these things that, of course, we have already thought through most of it, at least I have. And really, anything that's ever stumped me, if you just sit down and think it through, it's got a logical explanation. And that should be the case with the globe model, but there's no way that anybody's going to make these numbers work for these far polar eclipse signatures, period.
But especially an astronomer whose whole vocation and life is dependent on that whole structure, and that's where the resistance. They can feel the war drums in the distance, but I'm just getting right up there with you know, next week I file with all the accrediting agencies for all the school systems and finalizing the academic fraud charge, and solidify that, and hopefully within a couple of weeks introduce that to a court. You know, I need
Hey,
probably 10, 15 minutes.
You know what I just thought of? Isn't it time, or isn't it good time where we could do a petition or a request for a Freedom of Information Act on Operation High Jump, all the details?
Yeah, but that's not going to go anywhere.
You don't think?
All those if anyone's really earnestly tried to file a FOIA, that they will come up, if they don't want that information out, they will not release it. Because one of the items you have to answer is, why do you need this? Who are you and why do you need this? And anyone can trump that. Yeah, I couldn't even get a FOIA on my arrest back in 2012. So if I can't even get it on when they arrested me, then it's not going to happen if they don't want that information out.
Wow,
So,
that leaves you to wonder about certain things that do come out. Like,
oh yeah, it's totally planned. I mean, all that stuff with Sandy Hook, they wanted that released.
Well, no. What
sorry.
I'm saying is, like, for example, the Gulf of Tonkin, which was the entire reason why America got involved into the Vietnam War. They said that some Vietnamese fighters, unprovokedly fired upon a U.S. ship that was just peacefully, out there in the waters. But what actually happened was absolutely nothing. They just made the whole thing up, and through Freedom of Information Act, that was allowed to come out. Now, I know it took years and years, but I guess it was because enough people knew it and enough people got behind it that they had to come clean with it. And so that's why, I mean, I see what you're saying, but maybe Freedom of Information Act can be used as a good tool if we get enough people, active behind it. But it's really hard. It really is hard to get people active behind anything.
You need public pressure to at least tap on the door, because I tell you from experience that if they don't want to release that information, they have more than enough questions on the form that they will block it. So I'm just saying it's good. It's probably, it's something that people can certainly do and at least say it's out there and gain public pressure. But to sit down and think you're going to get anything for at least a year, I think it's very optimistic.
Yeah.
So.
Well, on that note, we've run about 40 minutes over, and gosh, I'll tell you, time flies when you're having fun. So, you guys, did anybody have anything they wanted to plug other than the $5,000 NASA Eclipse Challenge on Facebook?
Yeah, I do. Maybe we can talk about the Mandela effect sometime, maybe on the next show.
Yeah, man. Oh, that interests me too, Benny.
Yeah, we can talk about it. It interested me, and I don't know. There's one thing that I agree with on it, and it was the whole Luke, I am your father. Now I swear that he said Luke, I am your father. So I see that one, but what's the point in that? I mean, really, all the other stuff like the Mr. Rogers one and even the Nelson Mandela one, the whole thing. I remember, this is just people remembering things wrong.
Geographical anomalies for me. I remember Sicily being further away from Italy in my youth. I'm
not saying it isn't possible. I'm just saying I'm not convinced of it. But I'll tell you, that damn Luke, I am your father. Now, was that old? I wonder if that was in the digitally remastered version. I'll have to go back and watch both.
Yeah, there's a few that I think are legitimate. Sex and the City is one. I think Interview with a Vampire is another one.
Both of those I remember. I was actually in an interview with a vampire. Interview with the Vampire. When it first came out, see now I'm confused, but it's Interview with the Vampire. That's the actual name of it. And as far as I remember, it always was. And Sex and the City.
Yeah, but it's now Sex in the City, which doesn't roll off the tongue very well. And
no, it's the other way around. It was Sex in the City, and now it's Sex and the City.
Yeah, but I always remember it being Sex and the City.
Really?
I always remember being Sex in the City.
Yeah, Bob and I watched it together. I don't know about you guys.
Well, no, because see, I remember seeing it on cable, thinking like, "What is that, porn?" And of course, 14-year-old dude, I'm gonna look and see it. It was just some boring crap, and I never watched it. But I just seem to remember it being Sex and the City, and it was basically like a sitcom of sorts, right?
Yeah,
wouldn't it be funny if they broadcasted two different versions across the country, and so half the people, or even in different outlets, so half the people did see Sex in the City, half the people did see Sex and the City.
Wouldn't that be funny? Just
to screw with you.
Just to mess with everyone that they're both right.
It's so funny because when I used to live in Florida and my grandparents lived in Virginia, even though we were in the same time zone, the TV stations happened to play Jeopardy 30 minutes apart. So we'd watch Jeopardy and then they would get Jeopardy. And so my dad would call and mess with them and get all the answers right.
So
like the lotto.
So yeah, people do weave some dubious webs indeed, but sometimes it's for the better good, and anyways, it's been a real awesome show hanging out with you guys. Hopefully, I'll see all y'all next week. Maybe we'll talk about some any topics you guys want to bring up for next week is fine. I've got a few things that I can bring to the table. We can kick around. I mean, with this group and the others that we've got coming, there's no shortage of things to talk about. And like I said,
quantum consciousness with old Bob, I'd be very interested.
Absolutely, I'm down for it.
Yeah, cool. Next time.
Well, y'all be good, and just remember, check out the new video when you get a chance. It is 4 hours.
Just I'm gonna have a look now.
Clear your calendars, and I'll talk to you guys next week. And y'all spread the word, spread the world. Peace out.
Yeah, peace out, brother. Keep it flat.
Peace.
God bless, brothers. God bless.